Muted, I think. All right. Hello, everybody. Hello, hello. I know it's weird that we're calling it lunch because, like, for some of you, it's probably like mid-afternoon snack, and for others of you, it's nap time. I don't really know, but it happens to be lunch where I am. So you should feel free to eat whichever meal is appropriate for your time zone. I hope that didn't need explaining. So I also want to talk a little bit about some of the prizes and stuff that we're giving away. You know, part of the idea is to, you know, stimulate interactivity and all that kind of stuff. So matter of fact, where is the list of prizes? Kelsey, I think you sent it to me, didn't you? Let me see here. Oh yeah. So some of the prizes that we're going to be giving away over these couple of days include, we have some more WildFit 14-day resets that we're going to give away. We have a couple of like full WildFit video only training programs, like you get to do the entire WildFit program. We have a couple of those we're going to give away. We have an online speaking program, which is kind of a hybrid of the speech map you know, but also the broad spectrum appeal stuff. So it'll be some review of what you're doing now and some deeper dive into some other stuff. And then we have the Inception Marketing Video Training Program, which is a full deep dive 6-part process in Inception marketing. We will talk about using what we call Inception in your speeches, but that program is about how to create full-on Inception marketing campaigns. And then also we're going to give away a couple of SAM memberships, and the SAM membership is the Speaker Author Mastermind that we have. And we're going to give away a couple of those three-month memberships to the SAM program. And what that means is those people will get to come to our monthly calls and get access to that private Facebook group where we're there constantly working to support speakers and authors and getting themselves to the next level. Every month we have workshops, you know, kind of like this, shorter, obviously, and not the full 3 days, but we have little workshops and mastermind sessions where sometimes we bring in speakers, sometimes I teach some stuff. And it's really just about helping you to find the skills and tools you need to get yourself out there the way you want. And we have a new program coming out, and it hasn't really been officially announced, although I may have snuck it in, you know, into conversations here and there against the wishes of my team. But one of the things that I've been asked for a lot is for the methodology that I use for creating digital training programs. As many of you will know, our WildFit program is the highest rated program on the entire Mindvalley platform, and it has completion rates that have not only have they been highly rated at Mindvalley, but they even changed Mindvalley's education platform. Like they modeled that structure to create a different education model because of the way we design digital programs. We have something like 85% completion rate on WildFit, which is a lot better than the less than 10% completion rate that digital training programs usually have. And so we're going to be teaching an entire program. It's like a boot camp, 7 days, where you get to create your entire digital product over those 7 days. But it's not just like the normal, oh, well, you just, you know, you record this video and then you upload it to this membership site. We're more focused on how you create a program that people will actually engage with, that people will complete, and that people will then want to buy the next version of, and so forth. And so we're going to give away a free seat to that program. And that's a major, major ticket. So, and I'll tell you how you get the prizes. Who would like to know how to get the prizes? Anybody want to know? All right. How you get the prizes is interactivity, obviously, engagement, chats, asking good quality questions, that kind of stuff. Also creativity. That is, you find interesting, creative ways to add value to the program. I'm not going to give you any more clues than that, but you just need to think a little bit about that. And the other one is social sharing. And what I mean by that is that if I say something that caught your attention and you go create a meme for it and you put it out there and it, you know, and you use like either the Speaker Nation or the One Talk Workshop hashtag, we're keeping an eye on that stuff. And all those things are part of what generates when the team's going out there looking for the prize winners. So there you go. Those are the prizes, and that's how you win them. Who's planning on winning something? I'm curious. Who I see. Good. All right. Good. All right. We are going to move into strategic objectives. And in moving into strategic objectives, you know, the kind of homework assignment I gave you is to think about this. And so the first step in strategic objectives is knowing what is the primary strategic objective. And very often the primary strategic objective is just to show up. You know, it's just you're being paid to speak. So your primary objective is to deliver the producer's objectives. That's your. And then other times you're going somewhere to speak and your primary objective is to sell something. And then other times you're there to raise money for something. It's the easiest thing to think of is, what is the biggest reason that you're on that stage? What is the main reason you're on that stage? Like if that doesn't happen, you failed. And so that one's usually not so difficult to figure out. People can generally figure that one out fairly easily. The more complicated or more interesting one to work out is, what are some of the secondary objectives? And so secondary objectives are things that range from, yes, I want this to happen and I'm going to take actual action toward making it happen, to I'm open to this happening. It'd be cool if this happened, right? And one of the reasons it's really great to have a list of secondary objectives, even before you start putting the talk together, is that once you know what your secondary objectives are, it might have an influence on the stories that you choose, right? So as I mentioned earlier, I used the Instagram example, but I'll give you another one for podcasting. So when I first got into speaking and stuff like that, about 6 years ago, when I really launched these businesses, these brands, one of the things that we were looking for is more interviews, more podcasts and that kind of stuff. And it wasn't so tough. People would ask, and, if you do a good job on stage, people would come along and ask, and I'd do some podcasts here and there, and it was fine. But then something happened and I couldn't really understand it, but I just stopped getting invites. I just stopped getting them. Like, I was like, I don't know. I used to get an invite like at least once a month, something like that. But now I'm just not getting them. Can anybody tell me what they think might've happened? Did I offend somebody? I mean, what happened? Why did I stop getting invites? Anybody have a guess? Throw it in the chat if you think you know what it is. And you, Ambika and Georgia, keep your mouths shut. You know why it is, because you've heard the story. Just you be careful over there. I see it. I see. There, a lot of you got it. Rick says too expensive, became too popular, too busy and in demand, too busy. People thought is the real answer. Well said. And Donia, that's exactly right. What happened was something shifted where a lot of my videos started getting quite popular on YouTube. And people started getting this like, oh, he wouldn't be available. Isn't that bizarre? Like, I was like totally available. I was like, they just started getting this thing of like, he just wouldn't be available. I was wanting them. And so one day I had this really cool situation where this woman came to do a podcast interview with me. But the thing was, I was in the middle of teaching a 5-day workshop and I didn't really have time. And my team gave her 15 minutes to do a podcast interview with me. So she came and did the interview, and then she did it and it went so well that she contacted my team again and said, would you be willing to do a follow-up podcast if I came to you again? And we're like, yeah, but and she's like, when are you going to be in Europe next? And it turned out that I was going to be in Italy speaking at a Mindvalley event, funny enough. And she goes, well, but if I come all the way, will I be able to get like a good hour podcast? I'm like, yeah, no problem. So then funny enough, not forgotten about strategic objectives, but I hadn't added podcasts onto my strategic objectives list. But what was kind of interesting is that I was doing a Q&A session and somebody asked me about the Me Too movement. And I got to tell you something. If you're a man and you're like roughly my age and so on, and then somebody asks about the Me Too movement, you just want to leave. Just leave. Just get off the stage. There's like just about nothing you can say that isn't going to get you in trouble with somebody, but I'm braver than that. So I answered the question. And yeah, exactly, Rosemary, you just keep quiet over there. I stayed, I answered the question. And so the question came up is, basically the question is, do you think there are any negative repercussions of the Carol, that's exactly right. That was Mindvalley in Sardinia. And the question was, do you think there's any negative repercussions of the Me Too movement? And I said, well, first I need to be really clear. I believe that the general concept of the Me Too movement was a badly needed thing. Like the fact that women did not feel like they could communicate, that they could not support each other, it's a badly needed thing. There's no question we needed to find a way for people to communicate. And it does, like anything, there's a pendulum effect. And I think at times it can go too far. And they're like, well, why? How could it go too far? And I said, well, I'll give you an example. And the woman I did the podcast with didn't even know this story. But what happened was when she asked me to do the podcast, I like showed up at the address and it turned out it was her suite at the hotel. So here I am walking into a suite with a woman I don't know. And I'm like, I am uncomfortable with this. I am uncomfortable with this. And had I known she was going to do it in the suite 4 months earlier, I would have said, yeah, no problem. Listen, I'm not uncomfortable because I'm afraid I'm going to try and use my power to manipulate her. I'm not a predator. So I'm not uncomfortable because of me. Why am I uncomfortable? Because I don't know her. And in the same way that type of situation can be damaging for a woman, it can also be damaging for a man. It can. I don't know who she is. Is it possible that she could make up some lie about me and destroy my career overnight? Could it happen? Yeah, of course it could. And a matter of fact, what really got my attention was I read a story about an actor. I can't think of his name now. He's a comedian in America. And a woman went on a date. They met at I can't think what it was, some wine tasting or something. And they're both photographers and they're using an old vintage photographer, the same camera. It's so weird. And they got this rapport going and they went on a date and then he invited her back to her place. And this is, by the way, her version of the story, not his. And they went back to his place and then, you know, they started fooling around a little bit, but she didn't really want to fool around. And oh yeah, and they went for dinner first and he was kind of in a hurry after dinner. And he's like, well, let's go. And she didn't even get to finish her wine. Again, this is her story. He's like, I didn't even get to finish my wine. Then we went to his house and we got to the house and, you know, we started fooling around. I didn't really want to fool around. And then he put some pressure on me and he said, well, you've led me on. And so I did something for him. I will leave out what she did for him. And then she wrote this as a Me Too article. She wrote this as him abusing her. And I'm going, man, and all in the thing, she's talking about how bad he was at foreplay. He was terrible at foreplay. It's like he'd never understood the women anatomy. This is in the article, right? I'm going, bad foreplay is not what Me Too is about. It just isn't. Like, and now she's trying to destroy his entire career. So I'm walking into this room and I see this woman and I'm like, I didn't realize. And you know what I did? I turned on my cell phone, put it in record mode and recorded the entire meeting. And I shared this story on the stage, but here's the funny thing. The part of it that I shared was that the woman approached me and asked me if I would do a podcast interview. And I said, yeah, I'm always up for a podcast interview. And after I shared that story, I had like 4 people come up to me and go, can I do a podcast with you? And I'm like, holy crap, what's going on? I haven't had a podcast invite for a year and now I got 4 in one go. Then I thought about the story and then I asked each of them what prompted them to ask me. And they said, well, we've been at like 3 A-Fest now and every single time we wanted to ask you, but we were too afraid. But when we heard in the story that you're approachable, then we thought we'd come and ask you. Now, it was by accident, you understand. I didn't tell that story to get the podcast interviews, but it reminded me that when you have your secondary objectives in mind, it will help you to choose the stories well. So then you can have you can hand over this idea to the audience that you're open for the interviews. And so does this make sense to you guys? Are you following me? So when you get clear about your secondary objectives, it allows you to select your stories. But here's the other thing it does. This is awesome, guys. Is anybody here like a little afraid of Q&A sometimes? You're afraid to do Q&A with the audience? Anybody but nervous about that? I got to tell you, it's the best thing ever. It's the most fun. And I'm going to help you get over any concerns you have with it. There's a few words you need to hear. And if you can remember these words, you never have to be afraid of Q&A ever again. Are you ready? You might want to write these down. If you remember these words, you will never be afraid of Q&A ever again. Here they are. I don't know, but I'll find out for you. You see, the reason we're often afraid of Q&A is we think we have to have all the answers. You know what's really crazy? You tell me, who are they going to remember more? The person who had all the answers or the one who didn't have the answer, but then got the answer and gave it to you anyway? Which one are you going to remember more? Right? The second one. So there's sometimes an advantage in just being honest and going, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. And so if you just get comfortable with, I don't know, but I'll find out for you, then Q&A now becomes a breeze because it's only your ego that doesn't want to say, I don't know. Right? So when we get our secondary objectives in place, one of the things that it helps us with is the Q&A. It helps with the Q&A because now when how many of you have had this experience? Somebody asks you a question and there's 2 or 3 different ways you could answer it, 2 or 3 different examples. Who's got that? Yeah? Well, now, because you've thought about your secondary objectives before you went on stage, now somebody asks you a question and you're thinking, how can I answer this question to give them the answer and achieve one of my objectives? How cool is that? It suddenly is like a shopping list that helps you to choose the right answers. So for example, let's say that I'm in an event and I know that, I know that I want to get some podcast interviews because I know there's some podcasters in the room and I want to make sure they know it's okay to ask me, right? Of course, I could always do and I'm open to be on your podcast, but like, nobody wants this person who's asking to be on their podcast. Like, could I be on your podcast? Nobody's interested in that. I don't know what it is, but it's like reverse attraction, right? So if you, now in the Q&A, if somebody asks a question, if they ask any question that gets anywhere near that story of mine, I can tell that story and I know it's going to get me podcast interviews. Does this make sense to you guys? Are you with me? So your secondary objectives will not only help you to pick your stories, but they'll help you to navigate the Q&A so elegantly that you will walk off the stage every time and go, holy, I got this done. I got that done. I got this done. I got that done. Like, it's no longer about this one singular success. In fact, you can even go on stage and mess up your primary objective, but you achieved 7 other things. So it wasn't a failure in the end because you've got so many more opportunities for success. That's what your secondary objectives are for. And by the way, before we go to the workshop, there's one more thing. Is it possible that having really clear knowledge of your target markets, your primary objectives, and your secondary objectives, do you think that might even help you choose which engagements to go to and how much to charge for them? It's everything. It's everything. If you know those things and then somebody comes along and says, hey, will you come and do this talk? You're like, I know what my objectives are. And you know, somebody may come along and go, hey, are you willing to do a talk? But we're not going to pay you a fee. First thing I want to say to you guys, don't negotiate on your own behalf. Don't do that. Don't do that. In fact, guys, here's the thing. I've got this big online summit coming up in a few weeks, and I need some speakers for it. Who would like to come and speak at my online summit? Okay, don't do that. None of you are hired. None of you are hired. You should be writing in the chat, when is it? What are the dates? Is there a fee? Can I sell my product? Don't just volunteer, because I know you want it. Once I know you want it, I don't got to pay you for it. And so don't negotiate on your own behalf. Don't do that. And by the way, people, yeah, there you go. Sarmad, you're hired. He says, call my agent. Right now, I'm kind of kidding, of course, because you can certainly say, yes, I'm interested, but you need to talk to my business manager, right? And the reason is that you have a mission, a purpose, you enjoy it, you maybe like the attention. There's any number of reasons you like to be on the stage. So somebody goes, hey, I can put you on stage in front of 2,000 people. Yeah. No. Yes, I'm interested in that, but could you please talk to my agent? And you know, the thing is, your agent is on a commission, right? So your agent is going to get a percentage. What do you think the agent, how likely is it the agent's going to let you go for free? Because you know what? 10% of free is nothing. So they're not going to go for that. The agent's always going to, and by the way, here's what's going to be crushing for some of you. Your agent might charge a price and then you might not get the gig. Oh. Well, let me ask you, would you rather have 4 gigs for free or 1 gig for $40,000? I don't know. You do the math. It's that's pretty clear to me, but it's not just about the money, is it? Because once you know your overall target market and you know your primary and your secondary and your ideal target market, once you know all those things, then you change things. Then you take a look and go, well, there's a reason for maybe doing this one for free. In fact, I think Sherry on our team is here, and she used to work with another speaker who ran truly one of the best events I've ever been at. And their team contacted me 14 months in advance and asked me if I would speak for an event. I did it for free. I totally did it for free. I think if I remember correctly, they covered my expenses and that kind of stuff to come up, I think. But I totally did it for free. Why? Because I knew that it was a major high ticket event. Like, the people are paying $10,000 a piece to be there. Now you might think, well, if they're paying that much to be there, they got some money to pay you. Yeah, you could make that argument. But I also knew that my strategic objectives of getting WildFit out into the world was more important to me than that one singular fee. Incidentally, I did that one single event. Let me tell you what it's done for me. There's all kinds of things it's done for me. One of my very best friends I met at that first event. He's become one of my best friends in the world. He and I have gone off hunting with the Bushmen in Africa together. And he brought me into the Golf Channel, and I did a bunch of public service health broadcasts on the Golf Channel on NBC, major PR exposure. So, and I could go on. There's a bunch of other offshoot things that happened as a result of doing that event. But if I have to choose between those things and a fee, in that case, I would take those things. Now, if I can get the fee and those things, of course, that's best. But when you're building your career, sometimes it doesn't work that way. And frankly, for most of my early speaking career, I didn't need the money. And I had a big advantage about that. I didn't need the money, so I could put myself out there. But I want to give you guys a bit of a hack. If you ever accept, and I don't do this all the time, but at the same time, I've got a big enough reputation at this point that I don't really feel the need to do this, but I still, actually, Kelsey, make a note. We should do this from now on. I want to get back to doing it. And here's the hack I want to give you. Somebody asks you to speak, okay? And they want you to speak for free or for a big discount. And you've looked at your strategic objectives list and you kind of go, you know, I probably should do this. I probably should, because it achieves enough of my objectives that I'm willing to do this for free. Then what you do is you send them you know, whatever your speaker contract is, you send them the speaker contract and it has your price in it. And it says, you know, your speaking fee, say $10,000. And then it says one-time discount, $10,000. And you send that off and you get it engaged and you get the engagement locked in officially like you would any other engagement. And then you invoice them $10,000, discount $10,000, nothing to pay. Now, why do you do this? Well, there's a few reasons. How many of you know the Jim Carrey story about writing himself a check? Does anybody know about this? Jim Carrey one day writes himself a check for $10 million and post-dates it by 1 year. And almost to the day of the post-dated check, he got a $10 million advance for a movie like that. It was like, it just transformed everything. Now, this is very metaphysical and we can get into all the law of attraction, whatever. Yeah, we can talk about that. But what I'm really talking about is you starting to believe in you. And I can tell you right now, you writing an invoice for $10,000 and discounting it by $10,000 and sending it off is a much better feeling than just not invoicing them at all. And I'll tell you another thing that it does. A year later, when they're going, you know what? We need a speaker for that thing. Oh my God, you remember that time we hired Carol Benson? She kicked butt. How much was she? I don't know. I seem to feel like she was about 10 grand. I think we got a discount, but I think she was about 10 grand. You see what's happened is I've created the right impression. I didn't just go for free. I gave a discount. So if you do agree to go for free or offer a discount, you invoice at your full value, and then you mark the discount off on the invoice and you invoice them. So if it's 10,000, but like I did an event some years ago for a coaching organization and they only pay an honorarium. I mean, they pay, I think it was like $1,200. So they covered my expenses and paid me $1,200. Like, guys, sorry, this is not the most relatable thing I'll ever see, but I don't get out of bed for $1,200. You know, it's $1,200. What do you mean 12? But I had strategic objectives. By the way, I'm kidding. I'll get out of bed for $1,200. I'll get out of bed for breakfast, frankly. But what I'm really trying to say is that when I got there, the reason I chose to do it is I had strategic objectives about it. And then we invoiced them $10,000 minus $8,200 discount or whatever the math was, or $8,800 discount, $1,200 invoice. It's good for your business. It's good for you. And it's good for the market impression. So I really want to be clear. If you're going to discount, and by the way, some of you are asking, I don't know what price to charge. I don't know what price to charge. I don't want to go too far into that, although we will do more open Q&A a bit later in the program. I'm just going to say this. If you're in the United States and your speaking fee is anything less than $5,000 to $7,000, nobody's hiring you for anything. They won't hire you to teach preschool for that. Like they won't hire you. And the reason they won't hire you is they want certainty. They want certainty that you are going to be good. And if you're not charging enough, then they're not, like, nobody wants to hire the person and then they bomb and they go, what the hell? Why did you hire that person? Well, they were really cheap. Nobody wants to be defending their position based on price, right? So they'd rather, if you bomb, they go, I can't believe they bombed like that. Their fee is $10,000, right? It's not your fault anymore. It's the speaker's fault. So your fee, in my opinion, in the US, if you're anything under $5,000 to $7,000, you're unhireable, really. Now, it's not quite the same in Europe. There's a wider spread because there are some organizations that just don't pay great. They don't see the same value, but there are other organizations that pay significant fees. So you're going to have to do a little bit of market research relative to the type of events you're speaking for, and recognize that some events you're not there for the money. You're there to sell something and make your money. I've done that many times. I've been offered the opportunity to speak in front of thousands of people, but I'm not going to get paid for it, but I'm going to get paid in commission, or I'm going to get paid because I'm selling my product. I did one event for most of the speaking I did for Tony Robbins was like that. They covered all my expenses, but they paid me for product sales based on my marketing conversations, based on my talks. So I did one event where I don't remember exactly what my commission rate was, but it was, it was reasonable. And I did one event where I spoke for 2.5 hours and we sold $2.7 million worth of marketing consulting. It was a good day. I'd rather have that than the speaking fee. The speaking fee would have been a fraction of what I made on that deal. Does this make sense to you? You guys in? All right. So, by the way, Carol, that's such a good note. if you're comfortable with your price, it's too low. It's just like, if you're comfortable with your price, it's probably too low. And that's the tough part. That's the difficult part, because it means you're going to have to choose, as Brené Brown would say, you're going to have to choose courage over comfort sometimes. And that means you're going to have to choose a higher price. But let's say you're feeling a bit like, oh, they won't have the budget or whatever. I've frequently done it. My fee is X, but what kind of budget do you have? In fact, this year I did 2 events in for the EO, Entrepreneurs Organization, and I did them in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, first events of the year. And they came to us and approached me because of some of my videos on YouTube. And then they go, well, what's your fee? We told them. Then we had to give them mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, and they needed like CPR. And then once we got them conscious again, they said, well, we can't quite do that. And we said, well, what do you have? And then they took a look at what they had. And I looked at it and said, with their budget, what it'll basically do is cover my airfare. That's basically what they could do, is cover my airfare, my hotels, and that's all. So am I going to do that? Am I going to fly that far for small private audiences, right? I'm not even getting thousands of people. Am I going to go that far for only my expenses? Well, hold on a minute. I already had a plan to go to Africa to go spend 2 weeks with the Bushmen. So they're paying my airfare. All I got to do is do a couple of stops over here. I'm in. Plus another strategic objective. I wanted to get into EO and YPO. And you know what's crazy? I did the talk, the president of YPO. Now, YPO is another organization like EO, Entrepreneurs Organization and Young Presidents Organization. And I got off the stage, and all of a sudden I got this message from YPO. They're like, we'd like you to come back to Nairobi and speak for the YPO. Then I'm on a plane on my way now to Tanzania, and a woman walks up to me on the plane and she goes, are you Eric Edmeades? Yeah. She goes, I know you from Instagram. I know you've been speaking at some of the EO events. I am the education director for YPO Africa, and we'd like to fly you down to South Africa to speak for all the YPO chapters so they know to hire you. So you get my point here. Strategic objectives really work. Sadly, COVID canceled those events, but now that we're talking about doing an online version of it. So it's all still working out really well. So knowing your strategic objectives can also help when it comes to choosing the type of engagements you'll accept. This is an incredibly important, and by the way, I'm curious, how many of you have been reading about studying speaking from somebody other than me before? I'm just curious. How many of you have had that? How many of you have been taught this idea? Nobody. I'm blown away. It's like that every time. This is maybe the most important thing I could teach you. Yeah, I can teach you to use your voice, and I'll show you how to use stories. And there's a lot of people can do that. But this one thing can transform everything about your business. Everything. So here is the exercise that you're going to do. At first, on your own here for about 4 or 5 minutes, you're just going to work on your strategic objectives. So don't worry too much about the primary objective, because generally you getting booked is the primary objective. In other words, somebody hired you, your job is to deliver. You want to go sell something, your job is to sell something. You're running for public office, you're there to raise money and lie or something. I don't know. I don't exactly know. Apparently that's how you run for public office now. By the way, in case any of you are offended, that little slight was aimed at both sides of the aisle. So don't give me any grief. So anyway, what we're getting at here is that when you're booked to do a talk, you generally know what your primary objective is. What I want you to do is focus on what are the possible secondary objectives you could be aiming for. And so with your secondary objectives, the nice way to think of it is, if the stars aligned, what might happen as a result of this talk? That's the way to start with it. If the stars aligned, what might happen is I might get more followers. I might get invited to come back. I might be offered a book deal. I might be offered funding. I might have a new promoter come and talk to me. I might get invited to do another talk somewhere else. There's all these possibilities that might come in your secondary objectives. So I want you to take about 2 or 3 minutes and just write down a list of potential secondary objectives, because here's what we're going to do. What we're going to do is we're going to create a master list of secondary objectives from all of you. We're going to crowdsource the ultimate secondary objectives list so that you can all have who wants a copy of this, by the way? Who would like a copy of this? Well, there you go. So the way it's going to work is you're going to start with your list, and then we're going to put you into a breakout room, and you're going to work with your team to gel the list down. And then each team is going to post their list on Facebook. And then my team is going to take those lists and collate them into a master list. Does this sound good? All right, so take a few minutes right now, and and get your start going on your secondary objectives list. Go for it now. That is so 100% not me on the guitar. Like, stop the speculation. All right, welcome back. Welcome back. While I have begun my journey on trying to learn the guitar, I am about, as far as I can tell, I'm about 742 light years away from playing that song like that. So don't, no, that's not me. All right, all right, all right, all right. Let's see here. I'm just going through some of your comments here. Okay. Teresa, no, I don't sing. I don't play the guitar. I pretend to play the guitar. That's what I do. I pretend. All right. So strategic objectives. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into the breakouts. But before we do that, I just want to handle any pressing questions only about strategic objectives. I saw a couple of comments where people are still concerned about niche and stuff. I will do a wrap-up Q&A at the end. You can get there. But right now, I just want to make sure people are clear about strategic objectives before we go into this exercise. So I'm going to start here with Philip.
Eric.
Hello.
So my niche, I guess, would be, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Would be, I guess, teaching business freedom concepts like you taught, like I learned from you. And so my question is, I would think my primary objective is just to, I guess, spread the word and teach concepts about it. And then maybe the secondary objective is to, I guess, parlay that into some offerings I might be.
Skywalker has just landed, Lord. Good. See.
Prepare you. I was trying to prepare you for some special effects sound for your backdrop, but it messed up. Carry on.
Yeah, so I'm wondering if the secondary would be like, okay, not necessarily sell them on something, but if they want to expand more on it, then they can, I have some things I can point them to, or like I can do some coaching for them or some sort of affiliate program that does that, as opposed to that's not my main objective. I just want to teach people what I've learned and help them out, because I know most businesses are having the same issues that I had before.
Let's back up. Like, what is the primary objective then?
Just to spread the word about all the business freedom concepts, and like how people, just basic understandings of like, hey, you don't have to go through this where you're burnt out, you're stressed, you're overworked.
Okay. So, I mean, obviously I like that a great deal. It's, you know, that's what started me as a speaker. And truly, that's one of the things that started me is I one day did a business talk and people responded to it so well that I just felt compelled to keep doing it. And, you know, so the kind of strategic objective was to help people end their entrepreneurial pain. Yeah. That's how I thought about it. But I'm not sure I really understand the secondary objective issue.
Well, I work with other groups that will help businesses basically systematize and also help them with cost savings. So that would be a benefit of, and it's not like my main objective, like I want to push them all towards that. But if they see a benefit in that and saying, hey, well, here are some services I can point you to or help you with.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely you can do that. And those can be secondary objectives or primary objectives if you, for example, were on an affiliate commission and you actually wanted to drive business that way. Okay. But even as a secondary objective, it can be that way. Like
so you're either or
a bunch of resources I have for you. Okay. And, you know, and then of course, better than just offering the resources would be to tell a story about how somebody took advantage of those resources and got there, you know?
Okay. So it could be either or, primary or secondary on that.
Yeah, it just depends on, like, in a real sense, the way I would look at it is, what is the thing that has to happen? You know, like, what is the thing that really has to happen to make you feel like you achieve what you were, you know, like, so here's a good example. Somebody hires you to come in and speak somewhere and you're there to speak about leadership. Well, your primary objective is to share ideas about leadership. Now, if you go out there and you achieve a whole ton of secondary objectives, but you don't teach leadership, you're not going to get hired again.
Okay.
Right. So the primary objective is, here's another way to think of it. You're in the car and you're in New York and you want to get to LA. That's the primary objective. Right. Now, the secondary objective might be to stop off in Idaho and look at the world's largest ball of string. That could be a secondary objective. Another objective might be to listen to some great podcasts on the way. Another objective might be to bond with the family on the drive. Another objective might be to, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But the primary objective is to get to LA.
Got it.
Cool?
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Great backdrop. All right. Any other questions on, oh, there's quite a few. Okay. Okay, Sarmad, I'm coming over to you, but don't ask me about niches. Don't you ask me about secondary objectives. I'm like, listen to me. Go ahead.
Eric, no, I will not ask about niches. But looking at primary objective, something as simple as saying, I want to be a full-time professional speaker. Is that good enough to be a primary objective, or
No.
is that too wishy-washy?
No, it's not, because no one talk is really about that. Now, here's the exception to that. There's always an exception. For example, I get invited to speak at this conference, funny enough, in the cradle of mankind. Like, it's like home to me. That, like, my grandfather was like one of the most important archaeologists in that part. It's like my whole history. They invite me to come down there. And who's the audience? All the directors of education of the YPO Africa. In that case, I might say, yes, my strategic objective here is to establish myself as a professional speaker, as a major supplier to the YPO. Yeah, maybe then. But even then, it's not, the objective is not so fluffy as to become a major speaker. The objective is more to say, it's like, in that case, it's more to create attraction so that everybody at YPO wants to book me. I think that with the primary objective, another clue that it's a good primary objective is that it's immediate, that it happens by the end of the talk, mostly, that it happens at the end of the talk or during the talk or by the end of the talk. Now, that's not, I'm not going to say that's true every time, but I think it's a basic rule of thumb that you can follow. Now, as a secondary objective, it's also not that good because it's kind of fluffy and ill-defined, right? It's, you know, in other words, your secondary objective would be to get the next invitation. Like, I very rarely have I ever been on stage where I haven't had somebody come and ask me to do the next appointment. So my speaking career has largely been self-propagating. I've never had an agent. I've never had a booking agent. I've had a promoter of my events. That's different. But as a speaker, I've never had an agent, or I've never worked with a bureau, because my secondary objective has been, I'm going to be on stage and they're going to invite me back, and they're going to invite me to go to another stage. And by the way, I'm very lucky. It happens to me almost always. You know, when I went to do A-Fest for the first time, they invited me back at the same A-Fest. And then I spoke at 5 of the next 6 A-Fests. And I mean, Lisa Nichols speaks at many of them because she was the very first speaker at A-Fest. And then Vishen speaks at a lot of them. And there's a couple of other speakers that speak at them once or twice. But I'm probably one of only 2 people that's ever been invited back that many times. Secondary objective is to get invited back. That's one of my secondary objectives. Another one of my secondary objectives, get booked by other people that are in the room. And I've had that happen as well at A-Fest, where I speak and somebody comes, can you come do this event for us? So rather make your objective a little bit more something you can hit on the dartboard.
Okay, so more immediate, basically. That's what you were saying.
I think so. Cool?
Great, thanks.
Come back to your niche question later.
Awesome.
Amy.
Hey, thanks. How far-fetched and big do you shoot for your secondary? So like, for example, I understand the idea of getting more followers or getting a podcast, but I started to go kind of shooting the moon crazy and started thinking of things like getting an invitation to the White House and get a humanitarian award, or get an invitation to be on the news shows or late night. Are those like crazy shoot the moon secondary objectives okay?
They're not only okay, but they're outstanding. And the only thing I would make sure is that you make yourself comfortable with them. If you put them on there and you find yourself uncomfortable about it, then that's an issue. So are you actually, like, if you got invited to go and speak at the White House, would you really be up for it? Would you make that happen? Does it excite you to make that happen? It's okay if it makes you nervous too, but is it like, because for some people, it's just not possible. Like, honestly, they'd crumble under the pressure. So if they would crumble under the pressure of it, they just shouldn't do it. But if the idea fills you with amazement and wonder, then yeah, I think you should put it on there. I really do. I'll remind you that in my case, I was summoned to the Senate in Canada and given a medal by the government. What the hell? I wouldn't have imagined that. I wouldn't even have known to put that on. Now you know what my secondary objective is. I want to be knighted. That's my new one. I want to become a knight. I want like Sir Eric. I've decided that's on the secondary. I'll put that on my tertiary objectives list. I don't want to think about it every time I go on stage. And that's the other thing, is that you might have these large dream objectives that are kind of like, you know, like reserved items on your objectives list. You don't necessarily read them every time you walk on the stage like you do the other ones, but they're there. And I'll tell you something. One of the reasons you want them there is because, Amy, listen to me. Somebody walks up to you and says, Amy, we'd like you to come and have dinner at the White House. Then you don't want to react like this. You see, you don't want, you know, like, but the thing is if it's been on your list for a while, then this is how you react. Amy, we'd like you to come and have dinner at the White House. Thank you. I've been expecting your call. You know, like it's a different energy. It's like you're part of you've kind of made yourself comfortable with the notion of it. And so I would believe that I actually think that it's a really good thing for you to be willing to have those things as secondary or maybe arguably tertiary objectives that are in your awareness that you want to have happen, so that when they do stumble upon when they do stumble their way into your life, you're not actually all that surprised by it. And here's more important than not being surprised by it, that you recognize it. You see, like, remember with the Harv story, that you recognize it, recognize it. You know, and I'll tell you the story about that medal. This woman here, Mobina Jaffa, what a phenomenal. How many of you are Canadian? Who's Canadian here? Got some Canadians. You guys should all check out Mobina. She is a federal senator for British Columbia. She was appointed by Jean Chrétien. But if you really want to know, she was a refugee from Uganda during the Idi Amin years. And she's of Indian heritage. So let me tell you, being of Indian heritage in Uganda during the Idi Amin years was, you know, kind of not so good, not such a good thing. And by the way, when men disappeared, they were never seen again. And as I understand the story, her dad disappeared one day and they suddenly had to be rushed out of the country with nothing. And she's on this bus with every bag packed like refugees, packed to the brim, all scattered and whatever. And this hand reaches out from the back of the suitcases and grabs her on the shoulder. She turns around and it's her dad. He made it onto the bus and they got out their way to Canada, and they got to Canada with nothing. Then she goes off to law school. She becomes a lawyer. She starts a multi-million-dollar law firm. And then she gets into politics, and she's just a force to be reckoned with in politics. And then she becomes a federal senator. Now, what does she do with her? By the way, I've never wanted to go into politics. No, that's not true. I very seriously considered going into politics when I lived in the United Kingdom, because I found out that as a member of the Commonwealth, I could actually run for parliament. And I seriously thought about running for parliament because my business was operating and I was bored. So I thought, well, parliament would be fun. And in the end, I decided it wasn't such a good idea, and I didn't go that route. And I decided I'd never want to be in politics. You know what? Mobina changed my mind about it. It won't happen because of the way I live my life. But I tell you what, if I could be a Canadian senator, I'd take that job all day long. I'd want to get the job at about 65. And I think you keep being a senator. It's a lifelong appointment until 75, I think. And so and you know what she does with her power? She rescues children, girls out of sex slavery from countries that we won't mention on this call at the moment, because we don't want to badmouth any countries apparently, but there are countries that allow this stuff in there, and she's in there rescuing. Come on, Kelsey, I gotta deal with stuff here. And so, but the point is, she goes out and she firsthand goes to these countries and participates in these programs, and just a phenomenal, phenomenal woman. Now, here's the thing. I did not have a secondary objective of get a medal from the government. I didn't. I did have a vague fantasy of, wouldn't it be cool to be knighted one day? I'll admit that I thought that'd be cool, but I didn't think it was ever possible. But I did have this as a secondary objective: government influence. I had it as a secondary objective. I wanted to get to a place where I was able to get involved in the influence of government regulation, legislation, education, and all that stuff. And so I finished up a talk one day, and this woman walks up to me. She goes, "I'm so sorry. I can't stand in this line and wait for you. I have to go, but I need to talk to you for a moment." And I can't do that. There's 80 people waiting in the lineup. I cannot take one woman off of the side. It's just disrespectful to the 80 people in the lineup. But she hands me her business card, and she's a senator. And so my son came to the event. First time he ever saw me on stage anywhere. And by the way, how cool is this? My son and I have kind of a fun relationship where he grew up with the other side of the family, and they're not always as they come from the educated bank management, you know, that kind of thing. And I come from the speaking, and it's like, I to their world, I'm like an unreliable used car salesman or something. It's some weird, like, so he kind of has that attitude toward me a little bit sometimes, but then he's studying political science and all this stuff. So I invite him to this talk. Next thing you know, I go, Daniel, I don't have time to talk to Ms. Jaffa right now, but could you please take her car to make sure? I hand it to her. His jaw almost hit the floor. Now he's talking to a federal senator. But here's the thing. I made sure that he captured the details, that we connected with her, that we followed up with her. Why, Amy? Because one of my secondary objectives was to reach out and make contacts in government. And she's been a phenomenal resource for us. It's been phenomenal. So yes, you can have that. That's a very long question to a short answer, but you can have those things for sure.
Thanks.
All right. I thought I saw one more. I'm just looking for, it was Dr. Yasmilda. Please tell me I'm saying it right.
You're saying it perfectly.
Good.
And by the way, I have to say, Alka is in here. Love
Good
it.
deal.
Okay, my question is, and first of all, thank you for having this, because I couldn't have been able to travel even without COVID. And so having this is going to be huge, not only for me, but for my clients, which is pretty important for me. So my question is about the secondary objectives. How wise, business-like, so are there any of them, secondary objectives, that you could suggest anybody starting up and growing as a business that you consider you should have?
Well, yes and no. And that's partly why we're going to do this exercise right now. Let me ask you, what are some things that if they like, let's say you went and did a talk, there was 100 people there, and some really cool stuff happened after your talk. What might that be? What are some of those really cool things?
Anything that gives me more exposure. So the podcasting, the interviews.
There you go. That's the list. You got it. And by the way, guys, how she made the list good is she drilled down. She started off with exposure. Well, you know, exposure is too fluffy. It means too many things. It's not clear. But then she goes interviews, press, you know, she starts giving it the detail. That's exactly where to start. The way to think of it at every stage of your career is, what is it you need right now? Like, I'll tell you, I don't do the podcast story thing on stage so much anymore because I get a lot of invites now. I don't need more than I've got. So I don't do that one anymore so much unless I feel like, in fact, I kind of stopped doing it for a while. And then when COVID started, I suddenly had all this spare time on my hands. So I started doing it again. So you will change your secondary objectives based on the stage of development that your career is at and what's going on with your schedule at that time and so on.
Great. Thank you.
Cool. You're welcome. Okay. I think that I got to everybody for the street. Oh, no, I didn't. Georgia, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good.
Awesome. So I had two things. You had just made a comment. You said it was kind of about reading your strategic objectives. And I kind of thought, are you supposed to have your strategic objectives with you and kind of go over them before you go on stage?
I believe it's a great idea. Like, you know, have them saved in your phone or you know, whatever. And in Georgia, I'm just going to put it to you this way. Have you ever gone to the grocery store hungry without a list?
Yes.
You buy the wrong stuff and you don't buy the right stuff, right? So if you don't review your strategic objectives list before you go on stage, you're like a hungry person without a shopping list. And then you're scattered and the Q&A comes and you don't really handle it all that well and so on. Now, I will tell you, there will come a point in time when you become so versed at your secondary objectives that you don't need to look at the list every time. Like I, you know, to be fair, I don't look at mine every time anymore because I've been at this for so long that I just know I'm going to do this, I'm doing that. But I do think about it though. I do think about it. I go on there. Okay. Who's the audience here? How many people are there? What's my schedule the week after this? What kind of attraction do I want to create, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, but I highly recommend that you look at your strategic objectives list before you accept the engagement. You look at it when you're refining your mind map, your speech map for the talk, and then you look at it again the night before you go on stage, and then you look at it again right before you go on stage, and get it really clear. And here's why. because somebody's going to come along and they're going to ask you a question. And if you didn't look at the list, you're going to miss an opportunity to sell, attract, create money, get engagement, create transformation. You're going to miss the opportunity potentially because they weren't, the objectives weren't fresh in your head.
Can I ask you one other little question?
Of course you can.
While I was writing my list, I kind of found it a little bit difficult to write things that felt like they were directed right toward me. Like I felt like I was writing more things like, oh, this person will have this transformation, and then this will happen for this person, and then this, and then this, and then this. So it was more about other people than about what I would receive afterward.
It's okay to have some of that. You know, of course, like when I'm on stage, I have a series. I tend to think of the objectives relative to things I'm trying to achieve. So when it's about the client, for me, that's generally in the category of primary objective. If I go on stage and I'm there to talk, for example, about, you know, emotions or what have you, and I'm trying to, then one of my objectives is to facilitate phenomenal personal transformation. That's almost always one of my primary objectives when I walk onto a stage. By the way, for those of you who have been to Speaking Academy, remind me, and how many have been to Speaking Academy? Okay. Tell me this. How do I ask you this question to make it easy to answer without having to unmute you? Put one hand up if it was like a speaking program, or put two hands up if it was actually a personal development program that taught speaking. Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. How many of you have done WildFit? WildFit? Okay. Okay. One hand up if WildFit was a nutrition program. Two hands up if WildFit was a personal development program that changed your relationship with food. All right. You see what I'm doing here? Every program I have is designed to not just educate, but to actually transform. And so when you talk about the benefit for the other person, to me, that's in the primary objective issues to create these transformations for people. Does that make sense?
Yes, I do. It does.
Okay, and don't think I didn't notice that my name's under Mel and Oprah, by the way. It should have been on the top. Totally kidding. If you guys look at the whiteboard, there are three names on the board, and I saw it back there. I saw it.
I wrote that a long time ago that I wanted to be on stage with you in Mind Valley. And it was interesting because I got to be on stage with you at Mind Valley. We were at the same time. So I was speaking to the teens and you were speaking to everybody else, but it was the same time.
Good deal. Good deal. Okay. All right. A little fun diversion. Cheryl, you're up.
Firstly, thank you, because you just role modeled how can I answer a question that leads to my objectives, which you just did. So thank you, because that. And secondly, can you just quickly speak to the primary objective from the point of view from someone that hasn't done talks yet? Because you keep talking about being invited to talks and like you're already doing them, whereas I've only talked to my clients or I've held a talk. So my primary objective is just to go and have a talk for somebody else. So can you speak to it from those that haven't done it yet?
It's absolutely reasonable to have a primary objective to get practice.
Okay.
If you go to Toastmasters, what's your primary objective? To get practice, to get feedback, to get coaching. And so that's why I'm saying your primary objectives and your secondary objectives will evolve and they'll move as your career is changing. So here's such a good example, Cheryl. Somebody comes along and says, oh, I'll give you such a good example. Somebody comes along and says, Cheryl, we'd like you to come to speak at this event. It's in a really gorgeous theater. There's going to be about 400 people there. We're going to be shooting it with 3 cameras. There's going to be a camera up on the stage capturing audience reaction. There's going to be a camera doing the long shot in for you, and one guy walking around with a handheld camera capturing the up close stuff. And we're going to have a professional photographer there taking shots, you know, of you on the stage and you talking to the audience and all that kind of stuff. And we need you. You can talk for about an hour, and you have to pay $500 to be there. Who thinks she should take that gig? At her stage of her career, she should take that gig all day long. What would it cost her to fill that theater? To rent the theater alone is $10,000. To get 400 people into the seats is going to cost her $10,000. The camera crew filming for an hour of her time is going to cost her $4,000. You know, for her to get that video is a $25,000 investment. They're just offering it to her for $500. Strategic objective, get high quality video for YouTube.
Okay.
You see, like, so it's just a matter of looking at what's going on. If you're early in your career, let me tell you something right now. You need, listen, I didn't need this. I was lucky. When I started off, you didn't need a demo reel. You didn't need that. You didn't need it. And now you don't need it either, except you totally do. And let me describe the evolution here. Before YouTube, let me put it another way. Before digital video recording, you didn't need to have a demo reel because even a professional speaker might not put the money into it because it was quite complicated to rent them and get them developed and edit them. Remember, editing film back there used to be cutting physical film. So if you shot with 3 camera angles and now you wanted to get, you're talking about, I mean, it was a major deal. So many speakers didn't even have a demo reel. Then there came the age of digital recording, and then demo reels became a really big deal. And now they're not a big deal at all anymore. Why? Because there's just YouTube. You just go, oh, you want to see me on stage? Here's some links. You don't even need a demo reel anymore. But what you do need is video and photographs of you on stage. And you can't have all the photographs from one event. Like if you've got your website set up and it's like, there she is on stage and there she is over there on stage and there she is over there on stage, but it's all the same event. Nobody's stupid. They're going to go, she's been on stage entirely once, right? And so one of the things you guys all want to be doing is every single time you're in front of an audience, every single time you're on stage, you want it video recorded, audio recorded, and you want some photographs taken, even if they're not perfectly good quality. And obviously the better quality they are, the better. Now, back to your question specifically, Cheryl, when you're trying to put your strategic objectives together, one of your strategic objectives might be to get exposure. It might be to get practice. It might be to get good photography. It might be to simply introduce yourself to a group of people. It might be any number of things that are launching your career.
Perfect. Okay, that's what I thought. I just didn't want to be wishy-washy about it.
No, I mean, wishy-washy would be, I'm here to get more exposure. That is a little wishy-washy. But if you were saying, well, I'm being invited to speak at this conference of chiropractors and I'm looking to get more exposure in the chiropractic industry, well, then that's a good strategic objective for being there. Now, I don't think it's the best one. I'd be more inclined to say my strategic objective is to attract the attention of every chiropractor in this room so that they want to do business with me or buy my book or book me to speak or, whatever it is the objective is. Cool?
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Angela, you're up.
Thank you. I lead group meditations, and would it be a good idea for me to record that Zoom and then post it on my YouTube channel?
It kind of depends. What YouTube wants is that people are listening to the entire recording. So, when you put a recording up and they only listen to the first 30 seconds of it, YouTube downgrades it in the algorithm and it's less likely to get recommendations and traffic, if that makes sense.
That makes
So
sense.
you want to think a little bit about the kind of videos that you're posting. Now, the good thing about meditations for that kind of thing is that typically if somebody's into the meditation, they listen to the whole thing, and YouTube likes that a lot. So meditations can actually be really good for that sort of thing. But there's some other considerations which I'm sure you're aware of. But if you use any music in your meditations, you have to be very careful that you have the rights to publish that music, because YouTube will take them down or strip the music off or put obnoxious ads over top of the music.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. We're diving in. So now what you guys are going to do is you're clear on these objectives. You're going to go into breakout rooms, and this is the job in the breakout room. Somebody is going to volunteer to be the company secretary. You're not going to do this by nomination, because if you were in my group and you nominated me and then I tried to write things down, nobody'd be able to read them afterwards. So you want somebody who actually can take some notes and collate and create your list. So somebody should just volunteer to be the secretary, figure it out as a team. And here's the goal. The goal is, and I want to make this as efficient as possible. Each person is going to go through their list of strategic objectives. But let's say Vicky and Juliana are in a group together. Okay, so Juliana is reading off her 6 items. Vicky is going to scratch off any of the ones on her list that Juliana already said. You understand? And Kim is going to do the same thing. Then Vicky's going to say her ones that are still left, and Kim is going to scratch off any of those ones that Vicky said. And it might come to the end where all of Kim's have already been said. Doesn't matter. I just want to save you the time of reading them over and over and over again. So you're going to go around the list, and what you're trying to do is create one master list of all the strategic objectives that you can come up with based on the conversation we've had today. And then once you've created the master list, whoever's volunteered as the secretary is going to type that up, and they're going to dump it in. Kelsey, I hope you're listening, is going to create a thread called secondary strategic objectives. And then you guys are going to, in the comments below that, you're going to post your list. So they're all in one place. Your secondary objectives, secondary objectives. So is everybody clear about that? Give me a hands up if you're clear. Okay, Kelsey, groups of 4 and 5 again, same size. And let's just think about the timing of it here is, it shouldn't take, we should be able to get this done in 6 minutes. We should be able to get this, look, make it 7 to be a little generous, but we get it done in 7 minutes. Go. Okay. So, not enough time? How many did not have enough time? How many had enough time? Okay, good. Mostly. Sorry for those of you who didn't. It's hard, it's always tough to balance that out. Okay, Roxana, remember that where you're prioritizing. So Roxana says, I heard Eric say that getting photos and videos and practice goes in the secondary objective category. No. I was listing as an example of potentially second objective, but it could also be primary objective. I have done events purely for the video. I've done events because I just wanted the video, like that was that. And I've done events where, in fact, I did an event last year, early this year. I think it was early this year. Geez, I don't remember now. It's in the last 12 months, but I did this event in Tallinn, Estonia. And I think I spoke in front of, I think it was 6,000 or 7,000 people. And I had a number of objectives there. But the two really primary objectives, one was to introduce our quantum shift experience, a brand new event that we'd been designing for a long time and we're getting ready to launch. And we wanted to introduce the quantum shift experience at this event. We had 500 tickets available. And so we wanted to get some pre-sales going on that event. And my second objective was to get unbelievably good quality videography and photography of such a big audience in such a big stadium. So those were both primary objectives for me when we went there. Worked out really well. We sold, I think, 450 of the 500 tickets like right that moment. So we never even had to market the event. It was incredible, really. And we got incredible photography and videography from the event. So whether something is in the primary or secondary category has to do with you, not to do with whether it should be in one category or the other. It has to do with where you are with your career. Give you another example. I was invited to do a talk by Better You Academy. I was invited to do a talk in Uganda. And I was going to be speaking in front of 100,000 young student/entrepreneurs. I think it was 18 to 25-year-olds. That's 100,000 people, 100,000, right? So I start thinking about my secondary objectives or primary objectives. And I got to have video. But I started thinking, I don't just want video. I suddenly thought, you know what I want? I want a Muhammad Ali style video, like when he went to do the Rumble in the Jungle. What I mean is I wanted a film crew that met me at the plane, took me through the villages, saw all the activities we did like a little mini documentary of the time that I spoke for 100,000 people. So we engaged a film crew and we started making it happen, a photographer, the whole deal. In the end, COVID killed the event, but you understand that at that stage, I was simply there for this strategic objective of speaking in front of 100,000 people and getting great videos and photography. Does this make sense to you guys? Okay, now I want to give you another one. One of my secondary objectives, always one of my secondary objectives on stage is to originate content. Very often I come up with stuff while I'm speaking and I feel that it was a moment. And what I want you to know is that there's a few things you should consider about that. The one is that whenever you are doing that, you should absolutely, and without question, hear me, you should be recording every talk you ever do. Because you are going to say some truly brilliant things, and then you're going to think you're going to remember them. But if you can't find your car keys when you're leaving the house, how the hell are you going to remember this thing? Like, you know, I'm just saying, and I know not all of you can't find the car keys leaving the house, but you understand the metaphor. How many of you have ever had a neat idea about something or thought, oh, I better remember that later. Oh, I'll remember. And then it was gone. Who's ever done that? There you go. And so what we don't want to do is do that with some brilliant idea that we had on stage. And so one of my secondary objectives is to originate content, either sound bites or stories or ideas or, whatever it is, I'm trying to originate content. So today I actually did that. I said something I'd never said before. I said, doubt your doubts. I said, doubt your doubts. That's kind of catchy, isn't it? I thought that's kind of catchy. I didn't really think of it. And I said it a few more times and I could see the reaction from you guys. And then now this is on Instagram. If you can't believe your dreams, you can start by doubting your doubts. And it's so far one of the most popular things I've posted on Instagram in 2 months. Jay Shetty just shared it. Jay Shetty just shared it in his story. And it originated right here, right now. talking to you guys. So when you're on stage, you should always be aware that you are likely going to originate content. And so as a result of that, you should always be recording your talks. Every talk I do is being recorded, and most of my talks are being transcribed at the same time they're being recorded because we use Otter. So every word that I'm saying is being captured. You know what's really helpful about that is that later on when you're going, oh, Eric said that thing, something about dreams. What was it? I don't remember. Oh, why don't we just search for the word dreams and we'll find it. Secondary objective, originate content, develop great stories, that kind of stuff. Okay, so team captains, you now know that what you're going to do is post your list in the Facebook group. Is that clear for everybody? All right. And so we're going to then take those and make a master list and we'll share it with all of you. And here's why. I have been amazed at the number of times somebody's come up with a strategic objective and I thought, oh, I never thought of that one before. And the weirdest thing is if it's not on the grocery list, there's a good chance you're not going to buy it in the grocery store. So now you just added another thing you can put to your list. Now, I'm not suggesting that you should go for the longest list possible for every event. What I'm saying is you should have a master list. Like I learned something about shopping lists since I've been living here on my own during lockdown. I've never been a shopping list kind of person at all, but now there's a woman who does the shopping for me. It's a service, so I don't have to go out into the world because the world is so scary apparently. And so I have this woman come and do the shopping for me. So I keep a list. But it didn't really work. Like week one, I had the list, but then after she came back, I realized I didn't have some stuff. So you know what I started doing? Every single week, I just created one master list of everything I've ever bought. And then before I put the order with her, I look at the things I know I need. And then I look at the master list and see, do I need any of those too? So what I'm saying is this master list that we're going to give you is not for you to use that as your secondary objectives list for every talk. It's a master list so that when you're putting your list together, you can go, well, I'm going to pick 10 of them and I'm going to use those 10. Does that make sense to you guys? All right. I really hope you guys will pay attention to that because honestly, it might be, I mean, I'm going to say this again, I'm certain, but it might be one of the most important things that you're going to get out of this workshop. It is absolutely life-changing to be this strategic rather than simply, most speakers are tactical. They just go up and they just run their tactics. When you do this, the difference between this is most speakers are playing darts. They're just throwing darts at the dartboard. You're playing chess when you start thinking like this. You're thinking move upon move upon move. So you are ready for what's coming next. So what we're going to do is take a very short 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back and go into putting it all together in terms of actual content creation. So we're going to take a 10-minute break right now. Please get up and move around. Do not just sit there and scope Facebook. Please move your body. Get yourself moving around, and I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. So having worked on our strategic objectives and our everything that we've done so far, frankly, what we want to do now is start moving on the actual construction of the talk. And this is, this here is a very, very effective method for designing a talk that'll create all kinds of flexibility for you. And all kinds of flexibility for you and all kinds of memorability for you. In other words, it'll make your talks a lot easier to remember and deliver effectively. So we're going to talk first about ultimately what do you want to happen from your talk. So when we're talking about that, we're talking about like, what are the points you want to make? In other words, what do you want them to remember, or what do you want them to take action on? So when you're designing your talk, the idea here is to determine what are the key points or actions that you want them to take. The key points you want to make, the key things you want them to remember. If you're teaching something, it's what you want them to learn. If you're trying to facilitate transformation, it's the transformation you're trying to partake or trying to instigate. If you're trying to sell something, you're obviously, what you're trying to do is create a certain series of emotional triggers that are going to get you to that place. So the idea here really is to think about what are the points that I would like to make. And so one way to think about this, and there's a nice structure for this, and that is that it's very often nice to start your talk with the why. In other words, like the why they're here, the why they want to listen, why they want to pay attention, why they want to turn their Facebook off, why they want to get involved. And then you're going to move to another set of, and you don't have to follow the formula I'm giving you right now. It's just one way of dealing with it. By the way, one thing is, guys, I am inundated with private messages in the chat. Please don't send me, I won't see them. Please don't send me private messages in the chat. They just go boom up the screen. Write the public ones, and I'll do the best I can to get to the public ones. And then the questions you've got for me, ask me in the Q&A. I just can't, I can't answer all the private questions like that. So when you're putting the talk together, if you start with why, then you can move to what, like, what am I teaching here? What's the information? And then you can go to how to. In other words, how am I going to implement the information? How am I going to use it? And then the final section is called what if. And that's kind of like it's kind of the what if of what would happen. Like, I've learned this information. I know what they are. I know what it is. But what if this happens? And what if that happens? And one of the reasons that I quite like this structure, and it's very commonly taught in NLP, I think I first heard of it from Wyatt Woodsmall, my friend, Bruce Music comes and teaches it sometimes at our Speaking Academy programs. The reason I like it very much is that it follows the learning styles of the population. And there are very many people that won't bother learning something if they don't know why they're learning it. And then there's another group of people that don't really care about the why, they just want to know what they're learning. And there's other people that can't be bothered with the what, and they just want to skip over directly into the how to. And then there's another group of people that are just always learning from what if. And I can tell you the what if people, as a teacher, they are some of the most frustrating people in the world, because they're the kind of people that hear the first 15 minutes of the lecture and they start trying to do it already. Right? They start trying to do it. Where what people, they want to get all the information before they take action. They want to get it all down before they take action. And so that's a, and here's the thing, if you do your talk and you don't really address those different learning styles, it's not ideal because they're all in the audience, right? So if you figure out a way to get to all the learning styles, then you're more likely to appeal to all the people in the audience. And you don't have to follow that method, but I'll tell you, it's funny, when Bruce Music first came and taught it at the Speaking Academy, I hadn't thought about it for years. But then when I look back at just about every program I've designed and every keynote talk that I've done, it starts with why, it goes to what, it talks about how to, and then it talks about what if. And so it's a nice general format that you can use. Now, we've been at this a long time today. And so now we're doing a bunch of cognitive stuff. And I think that it's very, very possible that some of you are going to go, oh my God, this is a lot of thinking. Here's the thing. We're doing it at a surface level today, whatever time it is for you around the world. We're doing it at a surface level because over the next 2 days, we're going to take everything that we've learned and we're going to start applying it and putting it to work. So please don't worry too much if this is a little overwhelming as we move into this right now. what the goal is when you've got your points list is you now have a sense of what it is you want to give the audience. And then that's going to allow us to move to the next step. And I'm going to go to that now before we do the points list, because once you've gone to that list, you're going to go to a selection of stories. And what you're going to always want to do is have 1, 2, or 3 stories that you could use to make that particular point. Very often there's a point you want to make, and there's more than one way to make the point. And it's always kind of useful to know which are the points that you want to make. It's always kind of useful to know which stories you might use to make that point. So reason being, we talked earlier about strategic objectives. So if you have, or target audiences for that matter, you might change which story you use to tell the point based on which audience you're facing. Does this make sense to you? Okay. So then once we've taken a look at a list of stories that could help make that point, then we're going to take a look at putting together a speech map. We're going to take a look at putting all this together in a graphical mind map that we call a speech map. So let's go back to the points. When you're starting off, I've seen 2 things happen. I've seen this thing happen where some people go, I have no idea. I don't know what the point is. I don't know what point I want to make. And then I've seen the other extreme where it's like, people are like, oh my God, I have way too many points. I'm just trying to make 1,000,000 points. And remember that if you're doing a 20-minute talk, you might not be able to make that many points, right? If you're doing a 3-hour talk, you'll have a lot more leeway. But the other thing is that it's important to remember this, that in a very real sense, there's 3 layers of 3 styles of speaking in your talk. There's lecturing, and there's high-level storytelling, which isn't really storytelling. It's like helicopter storytelling. It's like establishing shots. It's like briskly mentioning something in a vaguely story format. And then there's detailed storytelling, where you're in the moment and you've taken the audience there and you're feeling, because if you want the audience to feel, you have to feel, right? So that's where you get in. And now what I want to suggest to you is that you want the lion's share of any talk you're doing to fall into the storytelling category, deep, proper storytelling. The high level storytelling, you can use that to connect stories. You can use that to summarize them or to repeat them. But high level storytelling will just put people to sleep if it carries on for too long. And then lecturing's tough. Lecturing's tough. Now, this workshop, it's a workshop. So if you're training and you're doing a workshop, you'll find that your percentage of lecturing is much higher than it would be if you were doing a keynote, in my opinion. So for those of you who've seen me do a talk on YouTube, you've never seen me lecture this much on a talk on YouTube, have you? I don't think so, because mostly that's going to be about storytelling. And then once I've told the story, I might then recap the points in lecture format, but I've earned the right. I've earned the right to do that because I've entertained or engaged enough with the story. So what we're going to do here is take a look at what some of the points are that you might want to make in this story. And I want to start off like this. I want to work with somebody who has a pretty good idea of a talk they want to design, and they want to help figure out what the stories are inside the talk. So who has a relatively good idea of the story that they'd like to deliver and wants to go through the process of pulling the points out of it? So I'm just looking through here. I think what we're going to do is just, I can't believe you don't have 1,000,000 hands up, but I'm going to go with Kristen. Okay, Kristen, you're up.
Hi.
Hi there.
So do you want to know about what the talk is, the objective, purpose, all of that first?
Yep.
Okay. So my company is a marketing strategy consulting firm. We have a book coming out in January. It's my husband, it's our joint business. And we've been doing this work for 20 years. I was in advertising prior to that. I want to develop a killer talk because once we launch this book, I want to go all around the country talking to marketing executives, anyone in business who wants to drive growth or transform their business through using these principles that I'm going to share.
Okay.
Okay. So my number 1 objective is for the speaking part of this is to develop a talk that really raises consciousness around this topic in marketing that hasn't been given a lot of voice. and it's called upstream marketing, which is strategy. And you've covered so much of it here in this today. So that's the main thing, is to establish this upstream marketing concept. And then secondarily is to sell more consulting work because of it, because we've established ourselves as thought leaders. And then use this to network, to do podcasts, et cetera, and then, you know, way down underneath that is some of the stories that we're sharing are best practices of companies like Apple, Google, Amazon. So there's stories of real brands and what they did and why they're expert at marketing strategy. And then there are stories of our clients, work that we've done, which I always, when I teach, I find that so engaging for students, because they all want to know, you know, well, what did you work on? What happened? How did that, you know, so there's great fodder for stories. I guess I'm just trying to figure out at what level am I delivering these stories? And I think it would be, you know, the best.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, going too
you're going way ahead. The idea right now is simply, what points do you want to make?
Yeah, points I want to make is, one, there are 7, 8, 9, I'm not even sure where we are. Not 7 to 10 principles that drive strategic marketing in successful companies. And we're going to share those. And we're going to also show you how the top brands in the world are using this concept to drive growth in their own companies. And one of the reasons they've been so successful.
Okay, so that's like a summary.
Okay.
But my question is the talk designed to enlighten people as to the fact that there are 7 to 10, or is it to teach them the 7 to 10?
Teach them.
Okay, so arguably in that case, each of those is a point you want to make.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so there's where you start your list. Your first list is each of the things you want to teach. I want to teach these 7 to 10 marketing principles. Those are things that I want them to remember or act upon when the whole thing is done. Make sense?
Yep.
Okay. What else do you want them to remember or achieve or take action on?
I want them to go, God, these guys really know what they're talking about. So I want to establish us as thought leaders in this area.
Okay, but you're back now to, you know, strategic objectives. I'm asking you, what information do you want them to retain or emote about or take action on?
Secondly, how this has been proven in the real world, not just by some of the top brands, but some of the brands that we've worked with. So I'm going to show them, I want them to remember concrete examples of how these principles work in the real world.
Okay, so you want to provide proof. Okay, and anything else?
Thirdly, I want them to have the confidence to go back to their organizations, whether big or small, and know how to use these principles to drive growth in their own companies. So I'm going to show them how to do that at the end. These are some tools, techniques, etc., that you can use in your own company, whether you're a startup or a multi-billion-dollar company.
Okay. So right now, the basic things, the things you want them to have in their head when you're done is you want them to have these 7 to 10 strategies. You want them to understand these 7 to 10 strategies. You want to give them proof, and you want to then give them some tools. Okay. Now let me ask you something. If you wanted to do it in order with my formula, where do you think proof would fall?
It's like, what are the things that you want? Well, I could fit it in a few places, but like at the end, you've got somebody and they're like, well, what if this happened? And you use
That's not proof though.
That's not going to be proof. Okay.
It's not proof unless the proof is directly related to the question they asked, not a more general thing, right? So proof is actually going to be why.
Why?
In other words, you're going to go, man, if you were to miss out on this talk, this is what you would miss out on. You would not get this. You would not get that. Or if you catch this talk, you're going to get this. You're going to get that. Pain or pleasure, either way, it's majorly about why. So you might want to even start right off the bat. We're saying this talk is going to be so exciting. In fact, I'm going to share with you some principles about marketing, about integrated marketing, that are going to show you how multinationals are completely transforming the world and creating what's called top of mind awareness, where they are absolutely the top in their category. And I can give you some proof of this. This company, what happened is this happened, this happened, this happened, and they went from here to here. And as a result of that, this happened. So you've told the story that established the proof. Now people are going, wow, that's really cool. So with that in mind, now I want to go and I'm going to teach you these 7 to 10 things. What, you have to decide whether it's 7 or 10, but you teach them that. Then you're going to go and say, all right, and now I'm going to give you some specific tools that are going to make it possible for you to deploy that. And the what if could be one of 2 things right now. The one is you could pull out some examples that have been really obscure. So that, again, these could be a form of proof, but they're like, yeah. And then you might think that this wouldn't work if you were a car manufacturer. But then it turns out that, or you might think that this might not work when the world went into the shutdown for the pandemic, but then this company did. So, you're giving them the what ifs. Or the other way you could do what ifs in this case is to do Q&A. Because Q&A actually often is about what if. People are going, what if that? What if I don't have this? What if I try that? Does this make sense?
Yes, this is fabulous.
So that is your points map to begin with. That's you know your points, you know roughly the order in which you want to tell them. And so now you're going to be ready for the next step, which will be to find stories that make each of those points work.
Right.
Okay?
Yep, that's fabulous. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who else can I do this for? Ingrid?
Hi.
Hi.
Again. I'm going to tell you a bit about my life. So I want to share with people that it is possible to do anything you want to do as long as you are willing to do it. And this is like the major lesson that I've learned the past year. So when I start to do things, I start to achieve things. And I see people, well, in Mexico, that are not willing to do the job and are just waiting for things to happen and are in a kind of, I see it also in my family, that they are in this victim state where they don't want to get out of. And I want to say it in a nice way, that for them to be able to change the country, feel more happier where they are, achieve the things that they want to do, that they have to do the work, that they have to trust in the process and do things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So now with all of that in mind, think about it like this. What are the specific things you want them to get? What are the realizations you want them to understand? Like, in childhood stories, there's always a moral of the story, right? Like, what do you want them, what message do you want them to be left with? What are the points you want to make?
I want them to feel empowered by their and believe in themselves.
Okay, so now you want them to feel empowered and believe in themselves is really a strategic objective. It's not a point. It's not something you can give them. Like, you can't tell them something and then they go, okay, I now, it's like you're not teaching them something. Now you can tell a story that gives them the feeling of empowerment. What are some of the things that you might need to give them for them to feel empowered?
I guess I could use some examples of how I felt empowered in my life.
Yes, you could, but now you're going to stories. So I'm starting off with, like, I want to know that you're doing this talk. Say it's a 30-minute talk.
Yeah.
What do you want them to actually learn? Not what do you want them to feel? What do you want them to learn?
I want them to learn how to, the steps to get out of a victim state.
Okay. How many steps?
I haven't thought about it.
That's why we're here. That's why we're here. It's okay. You don't have to have thought about it. But one thing that's very funny about humans is they really like when you tell somebody, I'm going to share with you the steps to get out of victimhood, or you show, I'm going to share the 7 steps to get out of victimhood. You feel the difference?
Yeah.
There's something funny about a defined number of steps or a defined number of tactics. It's like, oh, that's the definitive list, right? So it seems like what you want to do is create a list of the X number of steps to getting out of victimhood. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. What else do you want them to learn?
I want them to learn how to feeling better with your own body is also feeling more confident, and it helps to get out of there. So how to be healthier, how to eat healthier, how to have a healthier lifestyle.
Okay. Now, is that going to be one of the steps to remove themselves out of, is that one of the steps or is that a different thing?
I think that's a different thing.
Okay. So healthier lifestyle. Now, the only thing I'm going to tell you right now is that your talk feels scattered so far. Like these are quite different things. So it could run the risk of getting a bit scattered. Now, by the way, if you're on stage for 3 hours, you have a lot of flexibility and it won't seem so scattered. But if you're trying to do it in 30 minutes, it might get a little bit more scattered. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. What else do you want them to learn?
I want them to learn how to communicate clearly with the people around them to get what they want.
Okay, so now I'm going to say you're definitely going to get too scattered, Ingrid, but isn't it possible that you put together a talk that's like the X steps to lifting yourself out of victimhood? One of the steps is to get your health right. One of the steps is to learn to communicate effectively. Do you understand?
Yes.
So you're really wrapping it up into one powerful presentation, and it's based on these 7 steps. I think that's really where you want to go. So in that case, let's go back to why for a minute. Why do they want to hear your talk?
Wow. Yeah, I've watched all your videos and I never get past the why because I can never find it.
Well, why do you watch the videos?
To get inspired and hopefully get the information in my mind.
That's right. They're going to watch the talk because, and it's probably something like this. I want to share something with you today that can transform your life, because if you can break out of victimhood, you can start taking responsibility for your existence, and then everything can change. And let me tell you about a time when I did that in my life, or let me give you a story about Sally who did that over here. So, and by the way, if you don't do that, let me tell you where you end up, because I can tell you that many people have gotten themselves caught in this pattern of victimhood, and then they don't break out of it. And, and they end up depressed and suicidal. It's not, so you could go either direction or both. You want to hear this talk, because if you don't, this is where you're headed. And if you do, this is where you could go. Okay. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So then you're going to go to your 7 keys to lift yourself out of victimhood. And I think you've got a good start to a talk there. You've got a strong start. Why? And then you've got a good start to the, to the points that you want to make. You just need to start thinking you need to think how many points there are and what they are.
Okay.
Cool?
Cool. Thank you.
It's a good start. Thanks, Ingrid. I can do one more. Let's see. Who have I got here on my screen? I have Peggy. Hello, Peggy.
Hello. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So the points, should I start with the points I want to make, or?
Well, tell me a little bit about the story in the audience, or the talk in the audience.
So the talk is about inspiring people to discover their what I call their truth, is that their life mission, what they were born to create. Inspire them to open their heart to love and express this love in this unique way they've come here to express, basically. That's the point.
Okay.
And,
all right. And what are the points you want them to learn? What do you want them to learn? What action do you want them to take?
Okay. So So the point, the first point is for them to understand that they need to uncover their personal myth, what I call their personal myth, the scenario they've been telling themselves, what they've built, their egoic myth, what I call the egoic myth, because they're living in it without realizing it. So to realize first that you do have a personal myth, egoic myth, so you can basically, the second step would be to learn to stop identify with it, basically. So you can not,
okay,
so you can take.
Here's one clue. Here's one clue, Peggy and everybody. If I ask you the point, you should be able to say it in one sentence. Like, okay. So let me walk you through an example. The talk that I did for Mindvalley that time, it's called the hindsight window. Generally, it's a talk about how to reconcile bad, events that felt bad at one time in your life and make your life happier, generally. So what are the points? The first point that I make is to address the why. I do that with what we call a big fat claim. I just start off the talk right off the bat by saying, I'm really glad you're here right now. I believe this is a talk that you're going to remember for years to come. Now, that is a powerful statement to make at the front of a talk. I don't recommend using it all the time because then it'll lose its steam and people won't know that, but I knew that talk was going to be like that. So I said it. So that hits the why. They're like, I'm in there. I want the why. So now I want to go into the what. And I go into, well, the first thing I have to do is I have to introduce the concept of the hindsight window. That's the first point. I want them to learn about the hindsight window. Then I want them to learn about how to use the hindsight window to heal their past. Then I want them to learn how to use the hindsight window to inoculate against the future events. And then I want to tell them how to handle events that are happening in the present. Right? So those are the points that I wanted to make. Can you kind of sense the structure?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so Peggy, tell me now, with that in mind, what are the points you ultimately want to make?
The point I want to make is, one, identify your myth. One, identify your myth. Two, stop identifying with it. And three, get your truth through intuition. That means get a vision from your intuition. And
get a vision
from your intuition.
Yeah.
Not like, it's like when I'm going to be talking about true goals versus ego-derived goals, basically.
Yeah.
And four, open your heart to love and life in general. Which I'll be talking about acceptance, forgiveness, and other stuff.
Okay. So right now there's no why, which is okay. It'd be good to add one, but of course the why could be done as a story or a different point, or it could be done as a statement. Like, I'm going to deliver a talk for you today that's going to give you a sense of emotional freedom that many of you may never have experienced. And you're going to experience it here during the talk. And I'm going to give you strategies for how you can create that feeling for the rest of your life. So you see, you're making a promise at the front end. That's going to address the why for a lot of people. You could have said it another way. I'm going to do a talk right now that's going to show many of you that there's a story that you tell yourself that is holding you back from the true magnificence of your life. In fact, some of the stresses and worries that you're living with right now are not even real, but they just play into this myth. And I'm going to teach you how to identify this myth and free yourself from it and move forward into the future together. I'm just saying that your initial start needs to create the leverage that makes them want to be there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. And then you've got your point. Yeah. I'm going to help you identify the myth. Yes. How are we going to do that? Then I'm going to help you break free of the myth. Then I'm going to help you learn how to trust your intuition. And then I'm going to help you. What was the fourth one?
Open up to love and life.
Open up your love to life through acceptance and
forgiveness.
Acceptance and forgiveness. And so you've kind of got in 1, 2, 3, 4, in a sense, 6 points plus the why. It's all a good start. That's a great start.
Okay.
That's exactly where to start. Okay.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Tom, you're up.
Oh, cool. So I would, my speech is going to be about delivering the information to, I guess the ideal audience would be managers, that the employees are their most valuable materials and they should focus more on employees' engagement than on anything else. So the points I would make is the why is to make them aware that engagement is low in companies all around the world, and that people need a little bit more appreciation and love. Then the what section, I think I would go with, first of all, having management realize, having management on board of the whole process is very helpful. Second, realize that employees are the most important assets. So it's, I don't know, maybe it's kind of a little bit too similar to why. Third, teach that management has the most impact on employees' engagement. So, you can do many things in a company, but if management doesn't help it, it's still going to be hard. And then with how, I would go with appreciate your employees. So obviously I can make several points here, but I think the three most important ones are appreciate your employees, spread positive emotions, create a culture of trust.
Sounds like a great start. That's what you want. You just want those points running down, and then it'll plug in perfectly to the next step. Well done.
Cool, thanks.
All right, I'll do one more. Let's see. We're gonna go with Lucille.
Thank you. I'm actually going to be doing a workshop, but it can be fitted into a speech format at some point. The workshop is for women who want to reinvent themselves in whatever way they want to, career, relationships, etc. So my why is basically reinvention is not only okay, but it's necessary, and you could fulfill your life in an amazing way by learning how to reinvent yourself in a way that's unique to you. That would be my why. What would be giving them the specific tools for how to go about that. That would be about, I think I've got 5 to 7 tools. And then how to is to take each one of those tools and translate it into how can you do this practically in your own life, day by day. And then the what if, I would leave that for the question Q&A at the end.
Good deal. Good deal. And you know what'll happen is the more times you do the talk, the more what ifs that you've got out of the initial Q&As. In the future, you might not even go to Q&A because you know what all the questions are people are asking. So you might just start putting those stories in at the end and handling the Q&A in a preemptive way, which might be a little more predictable for time and quality and all that kind of stuff. So Lucille, that's a great start. That's awesome. Well done.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so guys, that's the point of this, is to just create a list of the points that you want to make. So I want to give you, sorry, can you please explain what is the what if? The what if is, there's a certain group of people that learn by putting things into experiment in a sense. So you come along and you go, well, like say I do the hindsight window and I show them how the hindsight window works in this situation, in this situation, in this situation. And then somebody's always going to go, yeah, but what do I do if this happens to my friend? Or what if it happens on a Sunday at 3 a.m.? You know, like it's basically that question, what if? And what it means is that they're testing what you've taught them in environments other than what you've taught them about. And there are many people who will learn that way. And I'll tell you what's fascinating is they're often very fast learners. In fact, if you're a teacher and you lose these students, they are the students that will disrupt your class, because they're like, they've already kind of got the concept and they're going to start testing it. And then they're going to start talking to each other about it. And, you know, because they just can't, it's so slow to talk about the what all day for them. So you got to get to the what if for those people to keep them engaged. And one of the ways to deal with the what if is to simply, like allow Q&A, because they're going to handle that. And by the way, one of the things that I've really learned about using Zoom that I prefer, mostly I prefer live. To be honest, I do mostly prefer to be there with you and, you know, that kind of stuff. But there's one thing that I really like about Zoom, and it's got me thinking about how to create this in the future, is that all of you that have what if moments, or some of you that are actually full what if learners, are constantly writing in the chat. And so it means you're not having to wait to the end for me to address the what if. That's why every now and again, I just drop something in. I'm actually making sure I'm keeping my what if people engaged. right? So what if is the testing of the hypothesis or the testing of the information by asking, well, what if this happened? I hope that explains that a little bit better. Okay. With all of that, then what I'm going to suggest, what I want you to do at this point is to build your list. I know some of you have already been building it, but I want you to take a moment and build the list of points you want to make. And guys, it's really easy if you follow the core formula. You have at least one why, then you've got the what points, which might be the 7 points or the whatever. Numbers are always nice that way. 5 points, odd numbers generally better than even numbers, but 4 works as well. And so does 8. So, it doesn't have to be that way. And then you want to get a little bit into the how to. In other words, I've taught you what is going on. Now we're going to talk about how to use it, and then potentially get into the what if, or you could just rely on that being a Q&A process or something like that. So what I want you to do is take, I don't know, like say 10 minutes, just working on your list. And I want you to know something. This will be the most frustrating thing that we do today. It'll be frustrating for 2 reasons. 1, we've been at this for quite a while today so far. And 2, it's incredibly cerebral. It's like you having to now imagine the audience, imagine what it is you're supposed to be teaching them, imagine what it is you want to learn. And some of you are going to be like perfectionists, and you're going to think that you have to get it right. You don't have to get it right. There's 2 reasons you don't have to get it right. This is day 1. We got some more time together, so you don't have to get it right. And the other thing is, you still don't have to get it right, because I've changed my talks many times after I've done them a few times, and I've learned and I've gone, oh, it works better if I tell that point ahead of this point. And so you don't have to get it perfect. You just got to get it started. Started is perfect in this situation. So I'm going to give you 10 minutes now to flesh out your points list. The points are things you want them to learn, things you want them to remember, actions you want them to take. 10 minutes right here. No breakouts, just 10 minutes here. Go. Okay. Now, how many of you feel a little confused? That's okay. That's okay. I want to remind you that anything that you take on when you're doing it at first, it is meant to feel a little uncomfortable as you're finding your way through it. And I will tell you that your quality of life is directly related to your ability to sit with the discomfort of the first 5% of anything you're doing. I'll say it again. Your quality of life will be massively, massively influenced by your ability to sit with the discomfort of the first 5 minutes of anything you want to do, anything new you want to do. And, you know, I was really surprised by this. I've seen it so many times in my life, but, you know, I got home for the lockdown and I suddenly realized I'm going to be locked down for, you know, weeks. And I thought, what do I want my life to be like? Like, what am I going to do during all this time? I'm separated from my family. I don't know what, blah. And I suddenly thought, you know what? I've always wanted to play the guitar, but you can't carry a guitar around with you when you fly all the time. So, but I'm not flying anywhere for a while. So I went and got myself a guitar and I posted online and a guy had a guitar, no strings, but guitar. So we got strings. And then my first guitar lesson on YouTube was how to string the guitar. Good lesson to have on YouTube. Thank God for YouTube, right? So then I learned how to tune the guitar. And then of course, then I found out that when you have new strings, you have to tune the guitar every 20 seconds because the new strings like take a while to take shape and all this stuff. And then I'm trying to figure out how to play songs. And it's like, oh my God, it's really, really difficult. It's really difficult. But then I remembered something. And that was if you try to do too much at one go, then it's hard for your self-esteem. And so then it feels bad. And so then you're more likely to give up. So I said to myself, all right, if I had a teacher, it'd be different, right? If I had a teacher with me, guiding me through the process, I could have had a 2 or 3 hour lesson and made progress. But because I was learning all by myself, I knew if I tried to overdo it, I would get overwhelmed. And so I just made a commitment that I would spend 5 minutes a day strumming away at the guitar, just 5 minutes a day. And then one night after doing this for about 2 weeks, I was watching Netflix or something. And I picked up the guitar and then I decided to go off Netflix and go on YouTube. And there was a song I wanted to learn how to play. And the song is Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd. And it's really it's a great song to start with as a new guitarist, because it's basically a little bit of like finger picking and a little bit of chords kind of combined into one song. And the tempo is quite slow. That's a big deal when you're learning the guitar, tempo, because, you know, moving from chord to chord to chord to chord, it's like, you know, and so Rosemary, Stairway to Heaven. Good luck with that. Yeah, it's like, yeah. I actually can play the novice, nobody knows how to play the song. I can play that version of it. But if you ever look at the actual intricate playing of Stairway to Heaven on the guitar, you have to be nearly a magician to play that song. And so I started with something incredibly simple. And I then started playing, and I found this website and it showed the chords alongside the music with the tempo and so on. And I just did this. And all of a sudden I realized it had been an hour and a half. It wasn't 5 minutes anymore. It was like an hour and a half. I was like, oh, what happened? And then the next day I went to do my 5 minutes and I was like, oh my God, I have to get to work. But I'd created the habit. And I have pretty much done at least 5 minutes a day, every day now for 2 months. There's been a few days that I've skipped, but mostly I haven't. And you know, what's really crazy is I fully know 6 chords. Like I know them enough that I can now recognize another song, and I cannot quite read it and play it, but I can stumble with it. And the song that I learned how to play, I can nearly play completely from memory. And then the other day I'm sitting learning about, you know, the G, C, and D chords, which make up like a phenomenal number of the songs that we all love so much. And so I started like just playing with the C chord and playing notes through it. And I started writing a song. I would never have thought that I would be able to find an uninvented song on the guitar that I really enjoyed. But I had to get through the first 5%. Now, guys, I still can't play the guitar. Don't try to pretend I can. I am a student. But the difference is that before I got a guitar, I wasn't a student. Now I'm a student, and I will eventually go from a student to, you know, a fireside guitar player if I'm lucky. You know, that's it. I'm not aiming here for, you know, rock God. I'm not looking for that. I think I missed that opportunity at this stage, but I could go to fireside guitar player, but I have to get through the first 5%. And so what I want you guys to understand is that as you feel frustrated, that feeling of frustration is the feeling that is either the gateway to your phenomenal transition into whatever you want, or it's the barrier that holds a bunch of people back. A lot of people start to feel frustrated, they pull back. And where do they end up? Nowhere town, right? Other people feel frustrated and they go, this is the time to pull forward. I use this metaphor quite often, but it's like when you're playing a video game, you don't get to the hard level and pull back. You get to the hard level and push forward. You play the game to get to the hard level. Isn't it true? So that's what we want to do here. So I know that this section feels a little clunky and it's new and you're not sure if you're getting 100% right. You're not. If any of you got it 100% right, then you need to teach me, because I don't get it 100% right every time. I don't get it 100% right anytime. I get it right-ish. Then I go do it on stage. I get it right-ish. And then I improve it. And you can ask anybody. You can ask, I don't know who on my team is still here, but you got, I think Sherry's on, Andrea's around here somewhere, I think. Kelsey, here's what they'll tell you. It is incredibly rare that I will walk off a stage and say, wow, I really nailed it this time. Maybe I've said that 3 or 4 times out of hundreds of stage appearances. What do I normally say coming off the stage? Oh, I had so many things I could have done better. And by the way, I may well and very often have been the highest rated speaker at the event, and yet I'm coming off with my list of things that I could have done even better. Let me tell you something. If you want to know when I'll give up speaking, it'll be after I've done 10 talks in a row that I didn't feel like I could improve. I'm done then. No point anymore. I'm not here for it to be comfortable every day, right? So I want you to know it's okay if this part of the exercise is a little bit clunky for you. Now, here's what we want to do as we move to the next section. And here's the great news. This is as far as we're going to get tonight. So you're in the home stretch of today. What you're now going to do is beside each point, you're going to write 3 stories. And I know some of you might not have 3 per point. I'm just saying the target is 3. If you can get 1, that's a victory. If you can get 2, that's great. And if it's 3, well, outstanding. But if you're making a point, like you want to make a point that, you believe that gender equality in the workplace is you want to teach the importance of gender equality in the workplace. Now you want to have 3 stories that proves that. Or you want to, like, speaking of gender equality, you want to prove that women make really good managers and leaders of people. And so you want to give your 7 points behind that. Now you need stories that show each of those examples. Does this make sense to you? You want to make a point that, you want to teach how to train dogs. Well, okay, I want to teach that one of the things you have to do with to train the dog, one of the points I want to make is you got to catch the dog in the act. You can't punish a dog for something they did 2 hours ago. That's one of my points. Now I need a story about how you can't punish the dog in an hour later. You got to punish them in the moment. So you see, that's what you're looking for here is the point, and then at least 1 story per point that would help you make that point. And if you really got them, 2 or 3 stories per point, because the beautiful thing is the more stories you have per point, how about this? What if you had a talk that was so good that you got invited to do it again? But now the problem is it's on YouTube. Like, here's a really good example. If you get invited to speak at a major TED conference, they actually want you to do a talk you've not done before. But what if you've already done the talk and it's on YouTube and it's already had hundreds of thousands of views? Then they know you've done it before. They don't want you to do the same talk. Well, that's one of the things that happened to me with Hindsight Window. Hindsight Window has been published both by Mindvalley and by Goalcast. And I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people have seen it now, but a TED conference doesn't want a talk that's already been seen. But is it not possible for me to do the exact same talk with different stories? Isn't it? It's a totally different talk, just teaching the same thing. And so that's why you want to try and aim for 2 to 3 stories per point. So for this next section, you're going to go off on your own, stay here connected. We're not going anywhere. Put a little music on, and all you're going to do is think of stories. Now, here's where some of you are going to get frustrated. Don't worry. We're only going to do this for about 15 minutes, and then we're going to come back and talk about how to pull stories and how to connect stories to points. But I first want your mind primed for the idea. I want your mind primed for the idea, and I just want to give you a couple little things about this. Very often, when you want to teach a point to somebody, you want to teach them that point because you've had that life experience. So very often the story is actually already in you somewhere. Or you want to teach the point because you've learned about it from somebody else. Can you tell somebody else's story? Sure can, long as you give them credit for it or you tell it, properly. You don't tell it like it's your own, of course. But could you do this? I want to share a story with you right now. And I think the best way for me to share it with you is to tell it like it happened in the first party. It didn't happen to me. It happened to my friend, but I'm going to tell it to you like it did happen to me. Can I do that? Of course I can. Of course I can. So it can be your story. It can be somebody else's story. Could it be, I was watching a movie once and I saw this thing happen. Could you tell that story? Sure you could. So I was watching a documentary. I learned it from this situation. So the issue is that it's a story. Some of them will be life experiences from you. Some of them will be life experiences in terms of observations you've made. In fact, they'll all be life experiences. Just some of them will be your life experiences, and some will be your life experience of somebody else's life experience. So for each point you've written down, you want to write at least one potential story. And by the way, when I say write the story, you don't write the story. You just write a bullet that lets you know which story you're going to tell. So if any of you ever watched the series Friends, the way they titled their episodes was the one where Ross found a pig in the bathtub or whatever, right? So you're going to think like that. You're going to be like, oh, I want to tell the story about the time that the guy filed the lawsuit against the car company. You know, that's it. Like, it's just like the title of the talk, enough that you'll know which story you're talking about. Does this make sense to everybody? I will take a couple, like 2 or 3 questions about this, but we're going to go into more questions afterwards. So I only want you to ask me a question if it's in the way of you doing this exercise. Anybody have a question like that? They really need it for this exercise. No? Okay, Michelle. Michelle, I can't seem to unmute you. I don't know why. How weird is that? There you go.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
My one question is, can I use one story to talk about or to prove the multiple points? Because we've talked about that in...
Absolutely. We will talk more about that, but it's a good question to ask right now. You absolutely can do that. There are many times where I will tell one story that actually nails a bunch of the points. So you might find that. You might go, oh, but this story here tells all 4 of these points really nicely. Great question, Michelle. Yes, you certainly can do that. In that case, what you would do is you would just draw like one of those brackets and go, this 4 points are being made by this story.
Okay. Excellent.
Good question. Anyone else with a pressing question? Jaco.
Yeah, hi.
How are you?
Can you, instead of a story, use a little exercise which give the audience an experience?
You can. You absolutely can. All I'm going to suggest to you is that an exercise is something that you are likely to do when you're not doing necessarily a keynote presentation or a TED Talk. It's very rare for somebody to pull off an exercise in a TED Talk or like raise your hands and that kind of stuff. It's not the culture. So what I would suggest in your case is that you come up with 1 or 2 stories and then you go, plus I could also use this exercise, because in a training environment, you might use the exercise, but in a keynote, maybe not.
Okay. Yeah,
cool.
thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else with something pressing before we do the exercise? It seems like no. All right, guys, jump in, marry up some stories to points, and I'll see you in about 15 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. All right. So what we're going to do very quickly, because we're kind of very close to time here, is I just want to recap a couple of things. What we've been focused on today is laying the groundwork for the construction of a talk. So right now we don't have a talk, but we have a bunch of the core foundational things of a talk. And now here's the great news about this. Many of you have had the experience, I'm sure, where you're driving past a construction site over and over and over again, and you keep driving past it, and it's like they're working, but nothing's happening, and they're working, nothing's happening. And then you go away for a week, and you come back, and there's a building. It's like, what happened? How did the building like happen so quickly? And it's not that the building happened so quickly, it's that the building happened over time by laying a really powerful foundation. And so what we've been doing over the last day here is laying that foundation. So we looked at target markets in terms of the overall group of people that we'd like to reach and the ideal target markets that we might want to customize our talks for at various times. We talked about our strategic objectives, and that is understanding that every talk will likely have at least one, but often 2 or 3 primary solid objectives, the main reason that you're speaking. But then we talked about the value of having a different shopping list, a set of secondary objectives that inform the way you construct your talk, inform the type of talks you might accept, also inform the way you handle Q&A and all that sort of stuff, story selection and so forth. So once we did that, we took a look at content creation. So we said we want to start with points, determining what are the key takeaways that we want for the client. What are the key takeaways? What do we want them to learn? What do we want them to remember? What do we want them to take action on? How do we want them transformed? Then we took a look at stories, and we said, what we're going to do is we're going to try to match up stories with those points as best we can. Like, I want to make this point. This story might do that. This story might do that. Now, right now you have all the parts. And some of you, how many of you feel like, wow, I think I could probably put a bit of a speech map together based on what we've built so far? How many of you kind of feeling a bit like that? Yeah, it's great. How many of you feeling like, hell no? No, not even there yet. Good. You know, like it's going to be all over the board, and that's okay. You're feeling the way you're supposed to be feeling. The next step that we're going to do, and I'm going to ask you to do some work on this. Now, Kelsey, do people have the speech map template? Do you guys have the speech map template? Can you give me hands up? Okay. Can you post a speech map template in the Facebook group? So we're going to post, you don't need it. I mean, honestly, you can make a map. It's not, but we're going to give you the template in a PDF in the Facebook group. And the PDF is really just going to be a way of sorting out the points and stories you want to make. And so what you're basically going to do is the topic is in the middle. What is the core topic you're speaking about? And you're not going to worry right now about the F15 or L15 unless you've already learned that from me before. Don't worry about that right now. What you're going to worry about is, what is the point ultimately that I want to make? And then what story ultimately do I want to tell? And I want you to have a rough idea of a speech map. And by the way, if you've come up with 2 or 3 stories for the point you want to make, just pick the one that you think is best at the moment. But we might then talk about when you interchange those out. So the idea is that when you show up tomorrow, you have the most basic scribblings of a speech map, nothing complex yet, just an idea of what it might begin to look like. So we can start thinking about how to segue the stories together and all that kind of stuff when we get together tomorrow. Now, we have a very brief sort of 5-minute period here. So I can probably take 1 or 2 quick questions on anything that you're feeling frustrated about, stuck about, excited about. Julio, you're up.
Well, my concern is about that I'm a kinesthetic person, that I speak very slowly, calmly, and so to appeal to people that are really visual, I'm pretty concerned about this topic.
Well, Julio, we'll talk more about that when we get to the delivery section, when we get into delivery. But I'll give you a couple of clues. The one is, what do we do when there are people that are very visual and we want them to be able to connect with really kinesthetic people? And by the way, for those of you who don't know what we're talking about here, we're basically saying that the world, everybody is on this kind of spectrum of communication, and it leads from at a feeling-based, what we call kinesthetic, to a more sound-based auditory, to a more visual-based, to a more picture-based visual. And people who are more visual are impressed, are sort of like louder, faster. And people that are more kinesthetic are often softer, slower. So first clue, Julio, is if I was talking to a visual person and I really wanted them to connect with kinesthetic people, I would ask them to drop down. I'd ask them to lower their speed and lower their volume. So what do you think I'm going to say to somebody who's kinesthetic who wants to connect with visual people?
To fasten the talk.
To speed up, to intensify, to add the volume. And you know what? You're going to say, yeah, but it's just not my kind. I'm just not like that, or it's just not comfortable for me. But you know what? It's not comfortable for visual people to do it either. But if you want to be a broad spectrum speaker, you need to be able to expand that range. Now we'll talk more about that in the delivery part after tomorrow, like once we've completed the content creation part. But there's one more clue for you. It's not just about your volume and your cadence and your speed. It's also about the vocabulary. Visual people really like when you use visual descriptors, colors and intensity. Like they like that quite a lot. And so it's actually possible to be more kinesthetic, but to talk about things like destiny and sunsets and incredibly vivid colors. And even though you're being more kinesthetic, the visual descriptors are quite appealing to those people. Now, again, we're going to talk much more about this when we go into broad spectrum appeal in the delivery section. Cool?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, Julio. We're going to go to Darby.
Hey there.
Hey.
So I have tons of stories. I have stories that come out my ears, and I did the main point and then the what's and came up with what's, and boy, they didn't resonate with any of the stories that are in my head. So I guess my question comes back is, do you just start looking around for connections to those? Like, for instance, my main why is to give you control over your future, to your destiny, over your own self. And so then the what's are becoming self-sufficient, working from home, being your own boss, things like that. Yep. So I went, be your own boss. Well, hell, I am my own boss, but where's the story?
Oh, well, what made you become your own boss?
Don't play well with others. Even though I'm very good with my sales customers, bosses always tell me what to do, and I don't do that very well for some reason.
So you quit a job at some point?
Oh, several times.
Yeah, and then you made a decision that maybe you'd rather be in control of your own destiny, and you decided to become your own boss and start your own company?
Yes.
Can't imagine where you're going to find a story.
Well, there's all kinds of stories in there. Well, I guess that's encouragement. Basically, I just need to sit with the stories and let them start coming out.
Listen, it's like I said earlier, you one of the problems is your own stories, because they're yours, they don't have the same like paradigm shift feeling in you that when you hear somebody else's story. So okay. Darby, if I said this to you, so I was working for this company, and I, generally speaking, I was a pretty good team player, but my boss was as unethical as you can imagine. I mean, he would probably stop short of actually stealing out of your wallet. But man, if he could like figure out how not to pay you back something, or if he could figure out how to not pay a commission to you or whatever, he would always find a way to do that. And after he'd done stuff like that to me enough times, I finally got frustrated. And I said, I am sick and tired of having my destiny in somebody else's hands, particularly somebody that I just can't even trust. And I did the toughest thing in the world. On a Wednesday, I made the decision to quit. I drafted a number of letters. I waited till payday on Friday because I knew once I quit, there was a chance he wouldn't even pay me my final check. And I sent my notice off on Friday, and I sent off the letter to the board, and I did the whole deal. And that was it. I started my destiny. And I'll tell you something, a couple of weeks later, here I am starting my own company, and I got this call. I got this phone call, and they were offering me a job to work at a competitive company, and they're offering me 90,000 pounds a year. By the way, back then that was about 150 grand and a Mercedes. And I had a baby on the way and a house to pay rent for. I had no money, but I had just started my company. And in that moment, Darby, I thought to myself, me being in control of my destiny is worth more than 90,000 a year. I'm gonna stick with what I'm doing. And I stayed on as my own boss. And I got to tell you something, it was not easy, but it was rewarding. It was never easy, but it was amazing. And the freedoms that I experience in my life today are because of that one day that I turned down that one offer, that I decided to stay in charge of my own destiny.
Well, you know, it's really funny you tell this story this way, because for a minute, as you were telling me the story, I thought you were talking about me and making it up.
I know. So did Sarmad.
So I guess
Sarmad thought I was doing the same thing because he wrote and he goes, how do you do that? Because he thought I'm doing a mind read on your story. But, you know, I often do that. How many of you guys at Speaking Academy watched me do that, where I told somebody else's story and like, right? But in this case, I wanted to do it exactly the way I did it. So he felt that I was telling his story and then realized I was actually telling my own story so that he would see the value in his story. So Darby, you got a great story. It's just that for you, it's like it's happened and you've thought about it a lot of times and so it's lost its punch. What you now have to do is figure out how to bring the punch back to that story and tell it the way I just told that one.
Okay. Okay.
Are you with me?
Got such a great offer. I never got such a great offer with 150,000, but I have certainly walked off several jobs for.
I got to tell you something, man. Rejecting that job offer was one of the hardest things I ever did.
Yeah.
Quitting the job was easy. That was easy. My soul agreed with me. My soul and I were not so much in agreement about my financial security and my family's safety when I turned that job down. It was scary.
Yeah. I think maybe your sweetheart was like, okay.
To be fair, she supported it. She supported it. Darby, that was a great, great question. I love questions like that dig us in and get us deeper. How many of you guys found that helpful? All right, good deal.
That really helped a lot.
We're going to do one more. We're going to talk to Silke. I can't seem to unmute you. There you go.
That's because I should do it.
What's that?
I needed to do something as well in order for it to be
okay,
unmuted.
cool.
So that was why. I'm sitting with like this confusion that I haven't really decided what my talk will be about. And that's like kind of stops me all the way. And in some ways, I sense that all the things I want to talk about has the same, that there is a core, but I can't get hold of it.
Okay, so what do you think that core is?
Something around beliefs, and it's not just limiting beliefs, but that is kind of the core. That is that we no matter what story we tell, we are always telling a story, and actually there is no story to tell. That is the freedom. That the moment we start telling a story, we're about life and how things are, we are limiting ourselves.
Well, I think that probably depends a little bit on the story, but you know, there are definitely.
Well, yes, but you know, you can choose a story. You can choose a story, and that can work for you for a while, but it will still limit you, and that will be fun for a while, but then later it will limit you.
So what is it you're trying to say? What you have a chance to speak to, you know, 100 business owners or 100 students or whatever. What is the message for them? So probably the message for them is something like this. And this is somebody else's slogan, so you can't use it exactly like this, but it's probably, I don't even know whose it is. I'm just sure I've heard it somewhere. I can't believe that it isn't, but in a sense, it sounds like maybe your message is something along the lines of change your story, change your life. In other words, you've got stories that are operating your life at the moment. And some of those stories are helpful to you at one stage of your life, but then pretty soon they're actually challenging you. And so, you know, sometimes you have to choose which stories that you are repeating. You know, I've noticed recently there's a story I've repeated a number of times and I feel like, holy cow, I thought I was smarter than that. And so now I've changed that story. I don't want to live that story again. So it may be something along those lines, but I think that what you need to be thinking about is, what do you want the audience to get? What gift do you want to give them? What is the value for them? And that will help you to work back, because if you go, well, I want them to get this gift. Well, in order for them to understand that gift, they're going to have to understand these 5 points. In order to understand these 5 points, I'm going to have to tell them these 6 stories.
Yes. Okay. So
does that make sense?
Yes, it does. So one of the things that I would like I have a book title is called Change Your Life One Belief at a Time, which is very similar to what you just said. Yes. So that will be to teach people different ways of changing their beliefs. But another one is actually to change the whole concept of how we look at physics. Like we see physics as, or the science, like the scientific way of looking at things, as the way of, as the truth. and I want to see something different, like that everything is one, and that is actually the fundamental truth.
So one of the things that we have to do is we have to recognize that the quality of our communication is directly related to the quality of the response we get. In other words, I always find what I'm always trying to do is find the very simplest way to get a concept across to an audience, the very simplest way. And you know, one of my favorite expressions from Einstein is, if you don't understand something well enough to explain it to a 5-year-old, you don't understand it. And so what I would ask you to think about is, how would you explain this to a 5-year-old? How would you get it across to a 5-year-old, and then a 12-year-old, and then an 18-year-old? Because one of the things that's interesting is, you shift your target audience, you have to shift the way you teach it. So that's where I'd like you to focus on. Maybe think a little bit about that tonight. Like, how would I get this concept across to some school children? Then how would I get it across to high school children? Then how would I get it across to college age kids? And then how would I get it across to, those in their 20s or what have you? And you might find that as you move through those target audiences, that the way you would get those points across morphs and gives you more clarity about how you would teach that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. It does.
Good deal. Thank you very, very
New
much.
way of looking at it. Thank you.
Cool. All right, everybody. I want to give you a huge congratulations. You guys have just maintained phenomenal energy. You've been super, super interactive. I know the team has already selected some prizes to give out tomorrow morning, so I'm super, super excited about that. In fact, you know what, Kelsey? I think you can give one away now. You know, like, everybody's here. We've gone a little over time, so anybody's here is an extra mile person. So why don't you, what have you got?
I think we should give Darby, I'd say let's give Darby the WildFit video only.
There it is. Darby, you got yourself a WildFit class. I was going to suggest we get you a reindeer, but whatever. It was, all right. So there you go, Darby. Congratulations. For the rest of you, we'll have some more stuff tomorrow morning. Well done today. I want you to know that from here on out, it accelerates. What I mean is that you'll now be starting to put stories together and put talks together, and you'll actually be doing some drills with each other, and it's going to be a little bit more movement. The first day is always a little bit of the tougher day, but we have accomplished big stuff today. How many of you guys feel like we've accomplished big stuff? Good deal. Congratulations on completing the first day of the One Talk workshop. I will see you guys tomorrow morning, and I want you to have an absolutely incredible sleep. And I want you to have a great night. For those of you who still have some evening left in front of you. And there is a different link tomorrow. How do they get that link?
No, Eric, same link. You're reading a different message.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
All good.
It's the same link. Somebody just sent me a flash message over here and I read it wrong. So you're going to use the same Zoom link. I will see you tomorrow. If you want to do a little extra mile homework, then you might want to start fleshing out your first draft of your speech map. I will tell you something about speech maps. I often have 5 or 6 of them before I'm done. Like, I'll sketch one and then I'll crumple that one up and I'll do the next one. So please remember, the only thing that's perfect is starting. That's the only perfect there is. It's just starting. Have a fantastic night, everybody. Congratulations and well done.